So I shouldn't respond to that. Oh, I would love to, but no, I will defer to my supervisor.
Go ahead.
We're live.
Yep.
Good evening. Today is Wednesday, October 25th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. We are in the Brecksville-Broadview Heights Education Center, 6638 Mill Road, Brecksville, Ohio. This is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is time for public participation during the meeting as an indicated agenda item. Prior to the regular meeting, the board will meet in executive session for a discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are subject of pending or imminent court action, item D per board policy 0166 executive session. This meeting will be live streamed via YouTube and will also be recorded for later viewing. Please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel where all recordings are posted. Item 1B, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1C, roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack, Mrs. Wigman, Mr. Dosen.
Yes. Brittany Wigman will be joining us shortly. She's running a little late. We're going to go on to item 2, executive session. Resolve to enter into executive session for discussion with the board's legal counsel of disputes involving the board that are the subject of pending or imminent court action per Ohio Revised Code 121.22. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack, Mr. Dosen.
Yes, we'll be in executive session for about a half an hour. We hope to come out at 6 p.m. where we will reconvene our meeting with a permanent improvement work session.
Okay.
All right, we are on item 2C, resolve to exit executive session. May I have a motion? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski, Mrs. Mack, Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes, we are now out of executive session. We're going to open up the doors and let the public in.
Yes.
Hello. All right, we're going to move on to item 3, which is our work session on permanent improvement. So we're on 3A, and just as a reminder, because this is a superintendent committee, only Ellen and I will be active participants in the dialogue, and the other board members will just be non-participatory. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff and Craig.
Yeah, so we're excited. We have a few guests with us tonight to kind of walk us through some of the permanent improvement projects from the past summer, where we stand with those. Then we'd like to kind of talk a little bit about, after the review of those projects, talk a little bit about master campus plan that I talked to you about a little bit, financial overview of our PI fund, and then kind of what we have formulated as our priority list of projects that we need to begin addressing. So with that, I'm going to introduce Brian Cost, who helps run the lead on many of these projects and was actively involved throughout the summer. So Brian, would you like to kind of bring us up to speed with the projects from this past summer?
Yeah. All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello, is that on? Is the mic on?
It is
Yep,
now.
now it is.
Thanks.
All right, so this past summer, we were able to get in the shingled roof. That was I came on board, we realized it needed to be done, and we're able to actually have a very competitive market when we bid it. So we came in pretty far under budget, but that budget was from my predecessor. So we did a good job either way with actually a $413,000 actual cost of the shingle roof. And we're closing it out now. We got some punch list items done. Should be done by the end of November and 100% closed out and finished. Asphalt replacement, we were in the same situation. Came in, we really needed to address it. And as you drove in, noticed a nice smooth ride in. And we actually got a bonus, call it a bonus, but due to the bid day savings, we were able to do the staff parking lot of the high school as well. So we definitely had some good savings on that one as well. Also the van and wheelchair lift, that one is on order. Just waiting for it to be built. Our middle school auditorium is in the process of being complete. We're just about at the end of it. I think our curtain is
I think it's coming in November.
soon. Yeah. So, and our interactive flat panels, or IFPs, as you'll see later on, those are all installed at the middle school, and I believe the staff is trained on all of them. They had a pretty good PD session.
We are, and just a side note to that, there's still some technical nuances in some of the classrooms and some of the accounts that are still being worked out. They're operable, they're being used. It's just there's a few that needed to be tweaked that the tech team has been working on with the manufacturer of the flat panels to make sure that they're most user-friendly for our staff. So the logging in, logging out issues, staying active. But overall, they're in and being used.
Then at the elementary school, we ended up putting some storefronts or some glass walls in some collaborative spaces so they can be used as classrooms, offices, or actually opened up and used as a collaborative space. So we weren't really sure where those would come in at, but we ended up getting a good deal on them and saved some money with those. And then tuck pointing at the high school. It's above the cafeteria and the kitchen area, and it just needed to be done prior to roof work. So the west side of the wall was failing, all the joints were falling out. So just something that needed to be done so we can proceed with future roof replacements. And overall, I think we did an excellent job with coming in under our estimated budget. Some were way higher, but ultimately, I think we did a great job with them.
So Brian, just real quick, and it's great seeing the actual costs on many of these coming in way below. But so like, I'll just touch on the first two. So the high school shingled roof, I know you said we had a more competitive environment, but was the scope the same? I mean, that's more than 75% less than we budgeted. So was it really just a competitive market? Did the scope change, or was the original estimate, maybe not quite where it needed to be?
The scope changed more to a realistic scope instead of tearing everything off. We really looked at what the needs were, and instead of just saying the entire roof needed to come off, well, let's reassess it when we do pull the shingles off. We did some preliminary moisture tests, so it wasn't assuming everything needed to be underlayment needed to be pulled off. So a little due diligence on the front end probably cut that number in half, and then from there, working with a consultant and then competitive bidding, we really got a good deal. Didn't come without some headaches with the contractor, but ended up coming through at the end and finishing it the day before school started. So
Great. And what about the asphalt? Did the scope change, or was it there again? That's over 65%.
Yeah, the scope changed. We added some to it, but then took some scope away. So there was a little give and take. Those numbers, they come in high majority of the time, but I think we'll see more of a realistic budget in the future, looking at it, because these numbers when I started, pretty much inherited the numbers of the budget.
Right.
So now that I've got a grasp on things, we'll close that margin.
Right. Okay, great.
And then I have a question, like, can you be more specific about how the scope changed? Because like what's been done is fabulous. It looks so much better.
There's still more to do.
Yeah. Like there's
That's coming.
definitely.
That's coming in later slides.
Okay, okay. So did that estimated budget of $1 million include the parts that are currently undone?
Not all of it.
Okay, okay.
But they will, as we go further into the slide, I'll go into it a little more about our areas. I took a look at sectioning and what's feasible. We bid at pretty much the beginning of summer, which is not ideal. We should really be having these conversations now and starting to bid in December, January, getting contractors lined up so they get their work is on their books. They know they have their jobs coming. Hopefully it works out best, which we kind of did for this summer of a last second. We needed to get it done, and let's see if it comes within budget. So
Yeah, you'll hear us talk a little bit about kind of shifting from being more reactive to proactive as we've onboarded both Leonard and Brian coming into the scene of like some of these business services and project management is trying to, like, the summer was a hard time to bid. We were afraid to bid too much and get really bad pricing. So it was better to take a chunk, and then now we're going to start working on a more long-term plan. So we're going to start working towards being proactive just as a district in general. So that's kind of part of the plan. Any other questions? All right, this is the big discussion.
all right, so last time I was up here, we talked about the high school and slab on grade. I'll give a little more history now, kind of just throwing some dates out there. You know, the high school was built, opened in 1999. In 2008 is when the first geotech reports came out with the slab or building. I'd say they said it was sinking or falling. So they did 4 tests in 2008, and that's when the realization of the unsuitable soils underneath were underneath the slab, moist soils. They weren't compacted right. So that's when it came to light. In 2011, we had an engineer, IA Lewin, do a visual assessment along with a structural integrity. That's when we really found out that wasn't the structure itself wasn't at jeopardy. It was just the slab that was sinking. So fast forward to 2020, did a couple more tests. However, the tests they performed were test bores and only looked at 2 inches in the entire area, pretty much. Drill down, and that's the spot that you see. Can't see further on 5-10 feet out or whatnot. So it gave us an idea. Those results showed the same thing with moist soils or unsuitable soils underneath. From there, around June of 2020, Geotech Services pretty much said we have 2 options, and those were our helical piers and new slabs, or high density polyurethane foam or mud jacking. So from there, we got a little further into it. 2003, I get involved, and we need to realize that we didn't know if there were large voids underneath that slab or not. Could have been if you start doing polyurethane foam, you couldn't scope that work out. So we ended up doing a ground penetrating radar across the entire floor area to give us a visual of what's underneath that slab. There are no large voids underneath it, which is a good thing. And we tested all 25 rooms and 9 corridors in that area, no large voids. What we noticed is some areas had rebar in the slab and some areas didn't. And then most of those rooms did not have any sub base, and that slab just rests on soil or fill, which is not ideal or not how they build them in today's world. So kind of takes us to present day and what are our next steps. So our next steps would really be to solicit for an RFQ for an architectural and engineer service. That way they can work with us to develop a comprehensive scope of work, schedule, and that includes phasing. This is a good sized project. The scope would include subbase remediation, which is the high density polyurethane foam. Architectural repairs, we don't know if we do lift that slab up, if the drywall will rack, if it'll crack, if we'll need to repair it, we'll need to paint. There's also the flooring because you're going to pull up the carpet. So we need an architect to help us along in that design, really give us a detailed scope, along with any mechanical, electrical, plumbing repairs that could be underneath that slab or need to be repaired. And then work into the other architectural improvements of the finishes of the actual school, the carpet, details like that. Working with the scheduling and phasing, I'd say we should probably go out for an RFQ sooner than later, get an architect on board, help us understand the scope of this project. We've been working pretty much with TDA, pro bono, just with relationships with the district and the elementary school, picking their brain, talking with them, and we're at that point of we really need to take it to the next level. Schedule and phasing, I'd say if we were to proceed on with RFQs, go somewhere along the lines of April 2024 would be a phase 1 with a contractor. June 2024, phase 1 with the actual construction of a small test area to understand what this slab will actually do, which is this summer. If we do a couple rooms and everything works out and moves as we think it should move, we know to proceed on with the rest of the building. If it doesn't, we need to reassess it and figure out a better plan. And then that'd go to a phase 2 of the next summer of full-blown actual completion of the rest of the building. And then maybe a potential 3rd year of all the finishes to finish off that high school. But I think first steps first are the request for qualifications.
To give you an idea of what we're talking about here, because we were in the rooms today, we were walking the high school doing a couple of things. And I'll let Brian give a better description of which rooms we're talking about. But standing in one individual's classroom, happens to be a baseball coach, it is literally like a pitching mound in the middle of his room. So when you stand in the center of his room, not only can you visually see the floor, but if he dropped a baseball in the middle of his room, depending on which way it would go, and you walk across them and you feel it. So Brian, if you could maybe just describe for those that don't live in the high school on a daily basis, what are the rooms we're talking about and what does it look like in the rooms?
All right, so the building, if you're familiar, you have your ground level, your main level, and your second floor. The main level, if you divide that corridor in two, you have the west side, which is the back of the high school, and the east side, which is the front, the stadium side. The bump outs or classroom bump outs along that front side of that walkway, along with the main office, is the area that is resting on slab. So that is I'll say the whole front of the high school classroom wing is the area we're talking about. Some rooms are a lot worse than others. But they all, if you take a handful of marbles and throw it down, they'll go in every different direction. There's no rhyme or reason of how that sub base moved in there. Didn't all move one way, didn't all move the other way. Some areas it's down, some areas it's up. It's kind of a mix match, and that's where your polyurethane foam will fill in those gaps and lift it all up.
So a couple of questions. So historically, I remember all of these things over the last 12 years. And just to clarify too, that what the architects consistently have come back with us, even the most recent, is that, and structurally, that the high school's safe, right?
Correct,
So
yes.
while we have slab issues, that is sinking floors, uneven floors on the lowest level, the building itself is totally safe, so people shouldn't have any concerns. And that also was, when it was shared with the board, ties into we don't have to have a sense of urgency to fix this because everybody's safe. But it is a problem, but it's not a safety problem. Is that still a fair statement?
It is. There's trip hazards.
I was gonna say, I would
Yeah,
go
when
to the trip hazard piece.
when I say,
Yeah.
when I say no sense of urgency,
nobody's
it
gonna
doesn't
fall
mean,
through a floor.
it doesn't mean,
Yeah.
we don't need to fix it. It just
Mhm.
means the building itself is still safe.
And there's other projects within the high school because we're getting to that age of that building that you're not going to replace flooring in those classrooms until you
Right.
fix the floor.
Right.
And we're getting to that point. When you walk in the high school, the carpet in the hallways and classrooms are original from 1999. So
Right.
we're getting to that point where we have to make some decisions because if not, we're just letting everything kind of ride.
Sure. And back when we heard about the two options, the pier options was with the gold standard, but that would be incredibly expensive as you take the whole slab off and you drill and put piers in, and then you redo the slab right on top of piers.
Correct.
Which would be very disruptive and very expensive.
Yeah.
And then the mud jacking, when we had talked about mud jacking, the question with the mud jacking was there's not a guarantee that it will work. And so the idea to do kind of prototype and do a few rooms. So is it all one slab? Is that all one piece of concrete? Or would that be like make cuts out of a room and then just jack up one room? How would that work?
I would say we do 4 to 6 rooms.
And they've said we can do that. They've recommended that
Okay.
to us to say we could do it in sections if we want.
Okay. Do they actually cut though? I mean, if it's
I don't
all
think
part
they
of one
told us unless
slab,
they-
I don't know. I'm just curious, but
That's where we need to lean on the RFQ and the
Yeah, okay.
architects and professionals to really tell
Okay.
us. From what I understand, they drill holes, stick a probe down, fill it up.
Yep.
6 feet, 4 feet, whatever.
right,
They decide, move on to the next one and
right,
pump it up that way and then patch it over.
okay,
And then you put either a carpet or some type of,
flooring.
there's different type of flooring too. We've had conversations of like a rubber base that if the floor comes up and it has cracks in it, you can't put a vinyl tile that will mirror right through.
Right.
So you need something to lessen that mirroring of all the cracks and the movement that has happened in the past 20 years.
But this approach of doing 4 to 6 rooms or doing part of it, so it's kind of like a little bit of a test to see, hey, is this going to work? And then we'll also get a better sense. And then I assume we would also get a better sense of cost of if this is the right solution, what does it look like to do the rest?
Yeah, we're testing the waters before we jump in.
And we do have some estimated costs, which you'll see in the priority list, just for the whole thing, the whole project of like some estimated costs for it, because the mud jacking is not, it's far more cost effective. And they did say, obviously, it could become more of a maintenance item. So we can monitor it and you can always mud jack again in 5 to 10 years. It would still be far cheaper than doing the piers.
And the
Yeah.
disruption.
And the disruption.
The piers in that is just, it's not realistic.
Like you couldn't even do it in the summer, most likely. So it would cause major disruptions in that building.
Why couldn't you do it in the summer?
It would take too long to
Oh,
do the
okay.
other option.
Yeah, the feasibility of actually taking it out, putting it back in, and you need heavy equipment, and you can't run a skid steer through the middle of that corridor. So you have to
You could
now,
knock out
bigger
a
walls,
wall.
the scope gets larger and larger exponentially when you start going down that avenue to review the helical piers.
I'm just curious if in your research or and maybe we'll find out if you've experienced any other school districts with a similar problem. I mean, this just seems so unnecessary that we're dealing with this.
I
I'm just-
personally have not.
Okay. Anyway, I mean, maybe when you do the RFQ process, you could find out. I'm just curious what other school districts, if they've had a similar issue and how they've handled it.
I think issues with new construction over the years, there's school districts that run into major issues. Springfield Local is one that comes to mind. They built a brand new 7 to 12 building. And when the kids walked in the hallway in the second floor, you could feel the floor, brand new building. And they've had to go in and make repairs to that new construction. So things like this, unfortunately, and you know the industry way better than I do, school construction industry, but unfortunately, you run into this with subpar work at times.
Well, and I think one of the big things is that back when this high school was built, because we talked about this at length when we did the elementary school, the new model was construction manager at risk.
Yep.
You have an entity that is responsible for everything. So for us, it shook. So if we had if we had a floor sinking at our elementary school, we have recourse. Whereas back when the high school was done, the CMR model wasn't used. I don't even know if it was around. And what you had was a bunch of general contractors bidding on all the different types of work, and no one entity was the one who was responsible for everything. So whoever did the floor or whatever, I think they even might have went out of business. Because I know when this got looked at many years ago, it's like you trying to go back to the contractor to who did it, right? But then you get into, so anyway, the model of how you do construction with the CMR model is supposed to provide districts with more backup if you have problem and somebody that's more responsible.
Yeah.
But the high school, we didn't have that. The model wasn't used back then, from my understanding.
Mhm.
Okay.
So we'll turn this over to Jeff to kind of talk about the master plan.
Yeah, talk about what we're
Thanks,
going,
Ryan.
and I don't know, a theme of tonight maybe is we continue to talk or strive to be proactive rather than reactive in some of these situations. So when we talk about campus master plan, and I'll touch on this a little bit in the regular meeting as well, because we have the Mill Road corridor traffic study that the city of Brexville shared with me. We had some conversation. There are some recommendations for them to make improvements possibly on Mill Road. However, the city doesn't want to make those investments in any of those improvements if we're going to be having anything change within our campus. You know, just like when we changed busing from 3 tiers to 2 tiers, and middle school, high school schedule coming together caused the increased traffic at the same time on Mill Road. So they don't want to make improvements based on that if something in our lane is going to change, no pun intended. So that's where I come asking about investing some resources and doing some master campus planning. And talking about what do we want our campus to look like and function. This also will tie in not only Mill Road traffic, but it will also tie in and begin the conversation about Hilton sitting down here on the other side. Because if we were to keep Hilton online or take Hilton offline, we need to have conversations as to how our campus is going to function. And because we know that property and that green space is ours, we want it to be ours, but do we want to put a third entrance on and off of campus? Because if we made the Hilton entrance and now and extended a road behind the board office here, some of those improvements that are in the traffic study, we null and void. We don't need to take 450 foot of clearance to put in a turn lane and pull eminent domain and things like that, or put a roundabout in at the 4-way stop there if we are adding an exit or entrance into our campus. So the city basically was saying, an engineer, Jerry, was saying, let's have some conversation about what plans do you guys have with Hilton? Because the very first thing in the traffic study was remove the light at Hilton's entrance. Well, the city doesn't want to do that because if we ever want to put it up, it'd be very costly. They would rather turn it off and bag it and then determine what we're going to do. So it just led to them looking across the table at me and saying, what are you guys going to do as a district? And I say, not really sure yet. I'm still the new guy. We have some decisions to make about Hilton that we're currently looking into and examining and determining where our enrollment is going to land. But once we make a decision there, it then leads to the campus in whole. On the other side of it, we have interest in our community to have a naming right policy that we'll talk about tonight, because we have people who want to make investments, or possibly have people who want to make investments throughout our community like they have in the past to enhance our facilities. And we don't want to enhance a facility in some way, shape, or form if later on we determine that we need to run a road through there or we need to change a traffic pattern. So the idea of having a master campus plan isn't about, oh, what buildings are we going to build on this campus? It's more about the traffic flow and how we want the campus to sit. I would tell you, though, in the master campus plan, when we go through this planning process, we should be having conversations about the middle school. And I'm not saying that we're going to have a conversation about building a new middle school. That's not where I'm going with this. But if we're truly doing what's in the best interest of our district, not only today, 5, 10, 15, and 20 years down the road, we need to have a conversation of if there was to be a new middle school, or if there was to be a 7 to 12 building or something, where on this campus would it be placed? And because we don't want to maybe put in enhancements or improvements on the campus, if maybe that someday could be a construction site. So we want to bring some people in who can do this service for us and begin those conversations. This would have, if we had, if the city wasn't asking me about Mill Road, I would tell you, you know what, this is going to be a result of the strategic planning process. Because during the strategic planning process, people are going to talk about improvements to athletic facilities. They're going to talk about traffic pattern. They're going to talk about Mill Road and Hilton. But we don't need to wait to the strategic planning process to start this conversation, because we need to do this. We need to be proactive. So that's kind of what we're looking to do. and tie it in with all the permanent improvements. And as we get down here, you'll see that we're beginning to forecast and plan for asphalt. We're not going to do all asphalt all at one time, because that means that it'll need replaced all at one time. So we're going to do it in phases. So we're going to see some of that as we go through. But master campus plan, looking for some direction from the board as if this is something that we should entertain and that we should start a process. Because if we were going to go to our community and our community partners and say, you know what, we'd really like to improve our stadium, and we'd like you to get behind it. We'd like you to write us a check and sponsor it. Well, they go, well, what's it going to look like? What is the entrance going to look like? Are you going to do something? Are you going to actually have an entrance to your stadium? You know, because right now, if somebody comes on a campus, where is our entrance? Where do you park? You have guardrails running down the middle of a parking lot that if you've never been here before, you're like, which direction do I go? If you've been here on a Friday night, you know what I'm talking about. So I don't think we start doing those little projects in isolation because we have somebody who's willing to do it for us financially without having the master plan and process. Again, it's a effort to be proactive rather than reactive. So I do want to kind of get some feedback from the board as to that's a direction we'd like to go. And then the next couple slides we have here that Craig and I and Brian can tag team, if you want to slide down a little bit, is Craig needs to talk about the financial overview. But after the financial overview, then we can talk about what that priority list looks like. So before I turn over to Craig to talk about the finances, what are kind of your thoughts as well, committee, I guess, because we're in a committee meeting. I got to get used to that here. So we're in a committee meeting. So committee members, what is kind of your temperature when we talk about that planning process?
Oh, I think a master campus plan is going to be a great investment. I mean, especially because we're now done with the elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
So we can now focus on this part of our campus. I think it's a great idea and it will ultimately pay for itself.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, the idea of what do we do with our whole campus?
Mm-hmm.
And just like you mentioned, trying to plan for the future, maybe, where, if we decide, hey, we're going to put another access road in, when we looked at that last year, there were like two options. You could go this way, you could go that way. Well, it's like you're slicing the campus. Which way do you go? So I think master campus plan makes a lot of sense. My only question would be, so, you've got to engage stakeholders. There needs to be some runway here to solicit feedback from various stakeholders and take a look and see what that looks like. Before then, I would think we would have a sense, and maybe we already do, of the need for Hilton, right? And I know we've had multiple conversations about this. The building has sat with the bare minimum being done to it for years now.
Mm-hmm.
And, to spin that thing back online would be expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be expensive to bring it back online, would be expensive operationally to run it. And if we did need more space in the district, and as of right now, we don't, but if we did, there would be other alternatives. So if we get to a place where we're confident that we no longer need that building, then my next question would be, do we keep that thing up and sitting there while we do this master plan? Or is there a pathway that says, we know we don't need the building, so it's got to come down, no matter what the master plan says, you're not going to repurpose that building. We take it down and just leave it as a green field, or what does that look like, I guess?
Yeah, being here a quarter so far, if you press me like earlier, I would tell you that we don't need Hilton. The space issues that are bantered about our elementary building is not 100% accurate. I sat in that building today. I've been in that building multiple days. I've talked to the teachers and admin. Could we have more space? If you ask any educator, they always want more space because it's ideal. But it goes back to what I've said to the board many times. We have a certain level of service that some people expect, but we also have a financial responsibility to be financially responsible. So we just have to find that balance between the two. The building is, I would tell you from my perspective and being in other districts and other buildings, we are so much better off than other school districts. And our children are in a building that they are getting a phenomenal experience. And it was almost, we have middle school coming to the board meeting tonight, high school last month, elementary is going to be in November. And it's almost, I would like the team to bring some kids in to tell us what they think about the building and how much they enjoy the building. But as adults, it's tough for us to adjust. I would tell you, even if we had that space issue in elementary, bringing Hilton back online at this point in time with my experience in the district, which is a quarter long, is not the wise financial long-term solution. And it doesn't necessarily free up the space that we may think in the elementary without major financial investments into that building to make it usable. And then the other one that we have a lot of people bring up is about moving the fifth grade to the junior high or middle school. I'm sorry. At this point in time, one quarter in, I tell you that's not wise. It's not needed. You take the fifth grade out of that building, you take the head count down, but the way the building is designed, it operationally doesn't really make enough benefit to put those students at the middle school. Right. So again, if we are in a situation where we are busting at the seams and we don't have the classroom space across the board at the elementary, that conversation changes slightly. But first grade is where our bubble is right now. Fourth grade is tight as well. But however, when we look at our current kindergarten class, we're in that range where the enrollment studies told us we're going to be. So I would tell you right now, standing here, I'd tell you that I would not be suggesting or recommending that we bring Hilton back online.
Well, and we also know too that, if there was a point down the road where the district was busting at the seams and we did need more space, you could add on to any of our 3 buildings without having to bring online a 4th building.
Your better financial investment would be to add on to the elementary and make the large elementary even larger.
Right.
I know people are not going to like that answer. However, that's the best financial decision long-term for the district. Not bringing a building back online with all, I'll call them hidden costs or sunk costs or fixed, however we want to fix it, throw it out there. Yes, the roof is in decent shape. Yes, the boiler's in decent shape. But when we get 5-6 years down the road, now we're talking about roof replacement. We're talking about boilers. We're talking about hiring a head custodian. We're talking about hiring additional staff. The efficiencies that the elementary building bring us is we need to continue to realize those. And as we become more comfortable in the space, those will only be realized at a greater advantage.
Right. And you also have with the Hilton, with that building too, if you spun it back online, it doesn't have all the latest safety features we put into the other buildings.
Right.
So then there'd be concerns about safety too.
If anything, we do a selective demolition and keep the gym and tie it into a campus master plan because you never have enough gym space. And maybe there's some partnership with the city to do some creative things of that nature. But to bring it back online for 4 or 5 or pre-K or kindergarten 1, whatever it may be, whatever configuration, I do not believe is the best investment for the district. So master planning, I'm sorry. So going into master plan, those things are going to run parallel for a little bit because we're already into that conversation. We just at some point in time need to make that decision. And I do think that is shortly after the first of the year and as enrollments start to roll in. So we're close to it. But I don't want to wait to that decision and then start the master planning. We can go into the master planning and it's just a footprint of where Hilton is right now. And we can adjust if it's there or not there. So I'm sorry, Alan.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I interrupted. I just timing wise, can you get what's today, October 25th? If you, start the process October 26th for this master campus plan, approximately how long do you think it would take to put together?
I don't have an answer for you yet because I haven't talked to I haven't even entertained talking to any of the companies that would help us with this process.
I'm just thinking big picture, hopefully, it sounds like everybody's thinking Hilton needs to go. So even though we don't want to make that decision today, that could be something that, we don't keep on board too much longer. It happens right after we get.
I think when I came in, we talked about springtime, making that decision and moving forward with whatever direction we were going to take at that time. And what I'm sharing with you tonight are my thoughts after being here for 1 quarter and conversations with staff who live in the building on a daily basis.
Okay, so I'll go over quickly with the financial overview because time just flies when we're talking about these wonderful projects. This is our current fund balance for the building fund. In my world, that is the elementary school or the bond fund. So that is the unencumbered balance that will be left over as of right now. There could be some small changes in that world, but $2.5 million. The current unencumbered permanent improvement fund balance, that's both the TTT and the other general district wide, is $2.9 million. We will get a receivable amount of about $900,000 in the spring, bringing that total balance to $3.8 million. So all of our funds together is $6.4 million. Similar to what we talked about before, we do want to reserve that $700,000 because we've now talked about the possible demolition of Hilton, and that is the estimated price to take that building down. So we have unreserved $5.7 million. The estimated projects that you will see and ongoing needs that you have in the rest of the presentation is about $3 million, and that's over the next 12 to 24 months, because some of them do carry over, which would give us a carryover of about $2.7 million, because we do have a lot on the agenda to get covered. So financially, again, like I talked about at the last meeting, is that we do have this influx of one-time funds as we have the building fund. And some of the projects we talked about, like asphalt, were technically planned and they've been delayed a little bit. So that's why that balance is increasing a little bit, but we still have a lot to do as we kind of get that backlog out and start working in a proactive manner. So
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
just want to ask, I mean, that's a sizable amount of money we have. I mean, are we getting about 5% on that money? Because
we are still making very good money. So just
be getting some pretty good interest on that money.
correct. Last month was $105,000. So yes, that's total district wide. So we have some money of that goes towards PI. Some of that money goes towards the building fund. Some of the money is in investments, as well as our general savings account right now is actually 5.6%. So that makes me very happy, because we're also not trying to like move it around like we were before when the interest rates were so low. We can make that kind of money right now in the bank.
Right.
Yeah. The ongoing needs, just to remind everyone, this kind of hits the TTT part, right? So buses, we're going back to beginning our two buses per year purchase. Curriculum, just to remind, we have $700,000 was allocated this year because they had taken some years off. That's for fiscal 24 that Dr. Martin is spending. And he will have final numbers for what we need for fiscal 25. He's working with departments right now. So we'll update everyone with that in the spring PI meeting. One of the technology things we're looking at is a phone system to go to a web hosted phone system. So that's just more of a technology piece that would be more beneficial for us in the day and age we are in. Our monthly cost is pretty high just to bring in traditional types of PRIs is what they call them. So doing a more web hosted version might be more sustainable for us. So I will turn this over to the priority list if whoever wants to talk about these things, but these are the things that's about almost $3 million is what's on this list.
Yeah, and some of these are of various need. I'll start with the first one, which is stair treads. I mean, if you've been in the high school, I'm surprised somebody hasn't found it convenient to trip on the stair treads and tumble down the steps. They are in dire need of repair, and it's something we need to take care of ASAP. Brian, this is something Brian has inherited in the process and some quoting that's already been done. We had a contractor out here today, just prior to the meeting, looking at it as well to get additional pricing. But we're talking about the stair treads and our stairwells across the campus. You see asphalt at $650,000. That's just ongoing. It's almost like an asphalt rotation, like you would buy new uniforms for athletic teams. We are going to do asphalt every single year. Teacher laptops at the high school, it's their rotation to have new technology there at $100K. IFPs are interactive flat panels that the middle school did last year. The elementary got them through the building process. This would outfit the high school so that all of our classrooms have similar technology available for both the teacher and the students. Phone system upgrades, as Craig mentioned just a little bit ago. The slab on grade that Brian spoke about in depth, $250K 3 times or over 3 summers if it's successful in summer number 1.
And that's $250 for all 3 summers, not $250, $250, $250. At least
Wow.
we're hoping.
Great. I was
So
gonna say, like,
it is far more
man.
cost effective than the peers.
But isn't that very much up in the air right now?
Technically, yes. What they've told us with that project is that the entire piece of it for the polyurethane foam, right, is about $50 to maybe $60,000, $70,000 in total. What we're trying to factor in is all of the other things that may go wrong, like the drywall, the carpeting, the flooring, all of those things to fix. We're kind of building in some cushion of what that will be. The actual cost of lifting the building is technically very minimal, but we could run into electrical problems or utility problems as the building shifts. Plumbing could break. So we're trying to build some of that in here, but that would ideally be the total cost over 3 summers.
Just to be clear too, we're only lifting the slab, not the building.
Correct. The slab, sorry.
Correct.
The
Just want to
slab.
make sure people don't be like, we're lifting the building.
Lifting the slab.
Just lifting the
Yes.
slab, okay.
So asbestos flooring abatement at the middle school, we have asbestos, obviously tiles in there because of the age of the building. And as you maintain them and wax them and strip them in the summer, when some of those tiles pop, they have to be removed. We have to abate the room. We have to put new flooring in the room. So Brian, I don't know if you want to share any more about that. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but you're the expert. So any insight there you want to put?
Building, make it work so long, and they start to get too much of a larger area. You can't just stand it. It's one of those where, as they pop up, we need to address it. There's not a
What's the typical cost of a classroom if you're in the summer and you have it happen?
$11,000 flooring for removal, testing.
So trying to make sure that we prepare for that because we know it's going to happen. It's just a matter not if, it's when. Continued roofing at the high school. We talked about the shingle parts of the high school being done this past summer. Now we have some of the flat roofing, auditorium, cafeterias, places of that nature. The next one is one that really is dependent upon some grant funding. It's a rapid alert system. It's Centegic is the name of the company. Long story short, and I'll just give you a little bit because it's just on a priority list. It's something we're considering, but we really would only be seriously considering it if we get some grant funding go along with it. The $167,000 for that system is over 5 years. It would be that's a 5-year cost total. 5 years, $167,000. For just demonstration purposes, it's almost like a RFID tag, credit card size that every employee in the district would wear. Has a button on it. I think Akron Public's using it, and Buckeye Local, we implemented it last year. Everybody goes immediately, worst case scenario, think active shooter. Don't go there with it. Go with what we've dealt with 3 times already this school year. If a student would have a seizure on the playground, hopefully the monitor that's out there has a radio to get help. Sometimes they try to use their cell phone, but when this is happening in front of you, to do your own code is difficult to get in. This is simply 3 taps to this. It alerts the safety team in the building. The safety team gets alert on their phone and shows right on campus where they are. So a softball player playing third base takes one off the face. The athletic trainer can hit it 3 times and help us on its way. So it provides a level of security and comfort to individual staff members that when they have to deal with the day-to-day injuries, fights, seizures, allergic reaction, all that type of thing. Then let's go worst case scenario. I hit it 8 times. What happens is I could put the whole district in lockdown sitting right here. And every single classroom and hallway has a strobe light that can blink 7 different colors, which would mean something. But if I sent us into lockdown sitting here, every device in the district would have a lock screen with directions on what to do, and then also has already called the authorities. We don't have to have somebody in the district pick up a phone and call authorities, and they're immediately on the spot and know where it's happening. This is probably one of the up and coming systems that you're hearing about. There's a limited number of districts in Ohio that are using it. Akron Public, Buckeye Local, Galleon, and many more were coming online this year. The states of Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia, it's well used across the whole states. This is a better investment of funds than repairing a PA system. So you hear about certain school districts, not to be named, that have concerns with PA systems not working because you don't know it's not working until you go to use it. All right. And even if it's fully functioning, you may have rooms that don't get a good PA, like a gymnasium, or you have students who can't hear anyway, so they need the strobe light or color like our fire alarms. So what happens is a better investment. Most of the time, building admin want a PA for emergency situations. We don't call over the PA to say, John, send John into the office like we used to when I was in school. The PA is mainly used for emergency situations. This would be a better investment of funds than redoing the PA systems in the middle school and high school. So when we're trying to weigh different projects and things, we're trying to get the biggest bang for our buck. This is one that Brian and I have explored. We're going to continue to explore with the admin team and our SROs. And if we can receive some grant funding to take care of some of the upfront costs, the system after the installation of everything is roughly $28,000 to $30,000 a year for this level of security, I would call it. And it is all maintained by the company. So I can go on for hours. I won't on that, but that's what the rapid alert system is.
Does that work off of Wi-Fi? Is that?
Great question. Yeah, it's more of an RFID Bluetooth, and I can't think the technical name right now of what they call this network. GeoGrid. And that's why it could be used on the baseball field or anywhere here on campus. But it wouldn't work on a bus, on the other side of town. It would only work once you're on campus. So, yes.
We got some sort of safety and security money last spring. Can we use, has that already been designated? Okay.
Yeah. If it wasn't used, we would be able to use it for that. That's, yeah. And there's some grant opportunities that Brian is exploring and we will assist with to try to get some of the upfront costs. However, when we get in a situation, we're not there like some districts, not to be named. Our PA systems work, but we do have difficulty with them from time to time. And are we better off sinking the money into something like this than repairing a PA system that is very rarely used, if at all? So that's kind of what we're looking at. Brian brought in a sample of what the card is. The card, I mean, it kind of works kind of like your Easy Pass transponder or transponder a little bit. It vibrates, again, a bus driver sitting in the middle of the parking lot at dismissal, kids haven't been dismissed yet, and they see a threat coming across the parking lot of that bus driver could literally lock down the whole district sitting there on their bus. So there's management concerns there with that too, and training and things, or if the staff member takes it home and their kid gets hold of it and starts pressing it at home, it's not affecting our system.
Yeah, don't press that right now. They'll come.
That one's fine. It won't alert anybody. Yeah. So the bus purchase, as Craig talked about, campus signage. I mean, this kind of goes with the master campus planning as well. The sign out in front of the middle school for the high school, middle school, the digital portion of that sign is dead and is not working. That's why it hasn't been on. I understand it had been a concern at one time how bright it was and certain hours. In today's day and age, a digital sign in front of a building isn't as valuable as it used to be. So we need to look at campus signage to replace that sign and also replace the sign here at the board office and maybe have a more general look for the whole district. So that's what campus signage is, as well as some signage on campus once you get onto campus and where you're heading. And then design services for master campus planning, our estimate right now is a rough ballpark of $50,000 to do that campus master planning. So I think, is there another slide? So the next slide is the follow-up and deferred. Brian or Craig, I don't want to see all the line. Anybody want to step in? You're more than welcome to.
Well, these are things we've talked about before. So one of the things that's risen to the top of the list is the chiller replacement at the high school. You may remember that this was supposed to be slated to be used with ESSER funds when we did the middle school. We just did not have enough money to do it. That system did break down at some point over the summer, I think, right? We were able to get it back up and running, but it still needs to ultimately be replaced. So Brian is doing some due diligence to figure that part out and put that'll probably end up going towards the priority list versus off the deferred and follow-up list. Same thing with window replacement at the middle school and the plastic water line. We've talked about those. We can triage them in the meantime, but we're working on some more information, I guess, to bring it before we put it specifically on the priority list. And then deferred right now is the LED retrofit, which can pay for itself. And Brian and I are going to be looking at that, and Leonard as well in the spring. He's the utilities expert. You know how much he loves the utilities we have. Fire alarm at the high school, storefronts at the high school, doors, windows. We've got some, what's that called?
Transitions?
No. Where the seals are breaking. So we've got some storefront issues in doors and windows at the high school. Large group instruction and AV upgrades at the high school, generators we've talked about before, and then of course high school flooring, which again, that kind of ties into what we're doing with that slab on grade, working our way maybe up and kind of splitting that amongst the different levels. So we're doing some follow-up with all the high school flooring as well.
I have a couple follow-up questions.
Sure.
And there was something that came out like last spring or over the summer that I sent to you. I mean, I know that there's now like electric school buses, and I believe the federal government was offering school districts some sort of tax. I don't know. There was some sort of benefit to buying an electric school bus. Do you guys know anything about that?
I'm somewhat cursory familiar with what the program you're referring to. There were some incentives to transition your fleet from fossil fuel to electric. And we're seeing very, very few districts doing it at this point in time. I think it's still so early that districts aren't willing to make that investment, not knowing long-term effects of it. But I'm not intimately familiar with the program.
But I hope we're like looking into it to see.
I think it's something that we're monitoring. There's been some people I don't know if any district wants to go full-fledged because there's some concerns over how long it takes to charge the bus, the electrical demands that you have. And so I think some schools are maybe looking at it more in a localized, where you may only have like maybe 5 or 10 buses depending on the size of your fleet or portion. So that's something we can talk to Fonzie about, because they do have grant money as well for those programs.
Yeah,
but there is some infrastructure involved with getting those electrical pieces in place at our bus garage.
Okay. I just hope that we're like looking into it and doing the research.
And I'm sure at OSBA we'll have plenty of information. And I think it's one of the major topics they're talking about OSBA this year.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a lot of education yet to be done and information on that to know if you're willing to start investing that way.
And then I assume, but it's on the list still.
Mm-hmm.
The campus signage, it seems to me to be putting the cart before the horse, to be coming up with an estimate for campus signage and a timeline.
Mm-hmm.
before this master campus plan is done?
Some of the signage was a concern even before I got here.
Okay.
And the sign not functioning out front and wanting to make some process. You know, the signage on campus, once you're on a campus, we're not ready for that. But signage at the entrance, main entrance to high school and middle school is needed or could be needed if we choose.
I just
Yep,
wanted to make sure we're,
Yep.
you know, gonna try and comply with whatever this master campus plan ultimately
Yeah.
recommends.
correct.
Any other questions?
No, I mean, just a comment to the other board members who, you know, obviously couldn't participate. You heard our feedback on the master campus plan. So if you have other thoughts you want to share with Jeff, if you would reach out to him and let him know what your thoughts are, if you're kind of aligned with where Ellen and I were, then that's all good too.
Okay,
All right, we ready to move on?
yes.
All right. Yeah, there's some people outside. You can invite them in. All right, we're going to move on with our agenda. So we're on item 5, President's announcements. I don't have much other than that there is an election coming up on November 7th, and the district is on the ballot. 3 of 5 board seats are coming up, and there are 7 people running. So everyone is encouraged to do your homework and vote so that you can have a voice in district leadership on November 7th. Item 6, board appointments, Cuyahoga Valley Career Center report. I reached out to Mr. Gilbride, who was not able to attend this evening. He said that there are no new updates, but he plans to be with us in November. OSBA legislative liaison. Ellen, do you have anything?
I do have one thing, an article from cleveland.com last week, which basically said, and this is just to update people, over the summer, the state of Ohio legislature expanded public or private school vouchers. And as of October 15th, there's been 41,120 students approved. That's just been since July at a cost of $239.8 million for the state. So apparently a lot of people are taking advantage of this voucher expansion program. And that's, you know, obviously very early on. So just wanted to follow up on that because it's some recent legislation. Other than that, no additional announcements.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 7, superintendent committees, financial liaison audit committee, Kathleen and I. The audit was the audits that they just did, do those count as part of the audit committee?
Sure. They did an audit on our pension systems for both SERS and STRS, and we received a clean audit. And this is the second time I've had that happen in 3 years.
Okay.
So I told them, please don't come back anymore and keep auditing us on our pension systems.
So the state audits our financials and audits all districts' financials annually, but this was an extra audit. It's kind of like being pulled out in the airport line for an extra random search. This was an extra check on our pension plans to make sure that we're adhering to all.
Kind of making sure we're administering it correctly. So they'll pull staff members and make sure that they've been properly deducted and things like that so that everything's
right.
in check.
And we were clean, so all was good. Permanent Improvement Committee, we just had our meeting a few minutes back. So if you missed it, it's in the recording, so you can go back and have it. The big thing that came out of that, I would say, is that we're looking at doing a master campus plan, starting a process to look at that with our whole campus, with Hilton likely not being needed anymore. We need to look more broadly about what our campus is going to look like and what it should look like down the road. Board Policy Committee, Kathleen and Tish.
Sorry, I've not been able to get into board docs until just now. So we have a final read tonight and draft. We're gonna look at a draft for naming rights, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I've looked at it a few times, but I wanted it in front of my face before I spoke, so.
And as we get into it in the agenda, I'll speak about a few adjustments that were made.
Yeah,
Okay,
apologize.
no worries. Transportation Appeals Committee, myself, there have been none. Hopefully, things remain quiet. Safety and Security Meeting Report, Brittany and Tish.
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Schools Foundation Report, Brittany.
Yep, I just have the one, the Schools Foundation is preparing for their annual fundraiser. It will be returning in 2024 on February 22nd. They will return to the 750 Mill location, now Carpe Risi?
Yeah.
Okay, want to make sure I said that right. The return around the world theme will also return. And they are currently looking for auction item packages. So if you know of anyone that is interested in donating a package to the Schools Foundation for their silent auction, you can reach out to them on their website at bbhsf.org.
Okay, great, thanks. PSO report, Helen.
Yes, the PSO hosted a Meet the School Board candidate night earlier this month. They wanted to thank everyone who submitted questions, attended, and apparently there were over 150 in-person attendees. And the recording, as of last Friday, had been viewed over 700 times. And reminding people to vote on November 7th. Also, the PSO membership drive concludes next week on October 31st. Although you can join the PSO at any time, but non-PSO members will be removed from the PSO Facebook pages starting November 1st. And the next PSO council meeting is November 2nd at 9:30.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to item 8, superintendent's announcements. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff.
A lot of those announcements are on the agenda. So I'm going to just say, let's go ahead and move on to item B. And I first want to start by thanking the middle school team that's here. It has been an incredibly long day with the normal teaching duties and then parent-teacher conferences this evening, then coming right over after that. So also to give you a little insight, when your presentation's over, please don't feel that you are rude or need to stay for the meeting. You can slide right out the door. It's been a long day, but we appreciate you being here tonight. So I've asked Mr. Rings if he could maybe introduce the team that he's here with and what we're going to be talking about from the middle school.
Good evening. I'm going to be really quick because the people in front of you are the ones who did the majority of the work, if not all the work. So we're going to turn this over to our assistant principal, Mr. Waters, instructional coach, Scott Kinkoff, from social studies, Mike McNamara, from language arts, Jen Lloyd, from math, we have Shelley Lohr, and from science, Nicole Soder. Ms. Daltorio was ill today, so she was not able to be here from the PE and health. So I'm going to turn it over to them because they have lots to say, and I know we don't want to be here all night long. So here's Mr. Waters. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. So first, thank you for inviting us here to present tonight. We really appreciate the opportunity. So ours is going to be on disciplinary literacy, which is something the middle school has been focused on for roughly 4 years, and really digging into it for about 3 years now. The 5 words there: read, write, think, speak, do, is kind of the big 5 that Mr. Kinkoff will focus on here momentarily. We'll get into more, but this is kind of the focus. And if you can click to the next slide for me, we are going to be presenting at OMLA for the state conference. We have 2 presentations that the team will be doing at the state conference that we were fortunate enough to be asked to present on. So our proposals got selected to present. We have one on creating a culture around disciplinary literacy, which is more of a leadership side. And then we have one that's more the teacher side on like implementing a disciplinary literacy practice, one that our teachers are going to lead. So one, myself and Scott Kinkoff are going to head, and then one the teachers are going to lead for us. So we have 2 opportunities that we're excited to be able to do here coming up on November 9th. And we will be presenting on November 10th at the state conference. So we're excited for that. Our main book that we focused on was this book here, and Relay Lent. Actually, we had for 2 years in-house. She came and led more of a partnership, really, with us. For 2 years, she worked with our teachers with 3 cohorts. And it was a cross-discipline cohort. So we had math, science, social studies, language arts, all of our encore specials, music, art, computers, foreign language, our counselors, admin. We had 3 different cohorts of roughly 20 to 24 teachers. And they had 3 release days. And this was over the course of 2 years that worked with Relay Lent with this book as kind of our anchor, but many other resources. And they were very, very valuable days that we worked with her on implementing a disciplinary literacy approach into our instructional practices to really deepen, student learning. And the point of disciplinary literacy is to deepen student learning. That's the purpose. It's to access the standards. It's to teach the Ohio learning standards. That's the purpose of it, is so that we can have authentic teaching practices that honor the disciplines. So when we get to 6th grade, that's really the first time that our students no longer kind of have that teacher that teaches all disciplines, that they have, or like a partner that does 2, math and science, and then language arts and social studies. They get to their day where it's segmented into 6, 7, 8 periods, and they start looking at their teachers as experts in the fields. So we'll get into what disciplinary literacy is and what it's not, but they really start to look at their teachers as experts in the field. That's what they are. Yep.
So isn't nationally recognized authority in disciplinary literacy? She came here. And when she goes to other conferences, she goes to other states and looks at their legislatures, she talks about us and how well we did this. She wrote an article recently that's going to go in this journal.
What was it? Educational Leadership. Yeah.
She put our story in there and it got edited out. She thinks because if she put our name in there, then she'd have to cite the others as well. So the reason why she's really important is because not only did she lead the professional learning, she sat with our leadership team and talked to us and helped us move this along. She was a tremendous source of wealth of knowledge to get us where we are today.
Yeah. And she really highlighted just how collaborative our teachers are at the middle school. They share resources, they share knowledge, they're highly collaborative. And in those cohorts, when you have teachers, all these different disciplines, they were sharing ideas where you have a science teacher that's learning from a music teacher. You had a social studies teacher that's learning ideas from a health teacher on how to implement these strategies. And they say, oh, I could use that in my classroom and just tweak it through a lens of a language arts teacher and how they could use that same strategy in a math classroom, which was really cool to see, that dialogue in those meetings. So it was very powerful during those cohorts. And I do want to thank Dr. Martin for giving that time and that resource and giving us that opportunity to have that two years of that professional development, because we did tell our teachers it was going to be something once we got the go ahead there, that is all we were going to focus on as a school, that we were going to do our best to just focus on disciplinary literacy and do our best not to focus on any other academic initiatives as far as professional development, that we were really going to dial in on DL. And we've done that, over the course of the last 3 years. So getting into maybe a dictionary definition of what DL is, it says here it involves the use of reading, reasoning, investigating, speaking, and writing required to learn and form complex content knowledge appropriate to a particular discipline. So again, the things we want to highlight here are obviously the words reading, reasoning, investigating, speaking, and writing. And the important here, that's not the adults in the room. That's the students. Okay, we want the students doing those things, not the adults. We want the students doing the heavy lifting. We want them reading and questioning and writing and speaking as if they are scientists, historians, nutritionists, musicians, mathematicians, whatever it may be. We want them to be the experts in learning to do that. Yes, as 6th graders, they're going to need to crawl before they walk, before they run. So from 6th to 7th, from 7th to 8th, it's a gradual release of learning these skills. So it is a slow process, but we have to model it regularly and they're learning to be an expert in these fields is the plan. And it's not perfect. We learn to fail, and through fail, we get better, as doing this, but that's what we are attempting to get better at every day. So kind of what it is and what it isn't, which, we did a lot of, when you hear the word disciplinary literacy, you kind of do a lot of what it's not. I'm not going to read this bullet point for bullet point, but really at first, it's not asking every teacher to be a language arts teacher. And when you hear the word literacy, you immediately think reading, you immediately think everyone needs to be a language arts teacher. That is definitely not it. So first, it's not asking every teacher to be a reading teacher or asking every teacher to be a writing teacher. They certainly need to be able to identify what is literature in their field or in their content or their discipline. And they definitely need to be able to recognize what is writing in their discipline, but it's not asking them to be a language arts or teacher. It's asking them to be able to know how to identify what literature is in their discipline and how to write in a science classroom, very specific, how to write in a math classroom, how to write in a health classroom, and so on. It's not asking them to grade extra or to give, generic reading strategies. Reading strategies and just content specific reading strategies, there's a place for that, but that's not what DL is. And it's also not like an extra thing we just do. It's like a +1. It's not, hey, it's time for DL, kids. That's not what it is. It's something we authentically, we add into our lessons. It's something that just it's something that we do. It's not something that's an add-on. It's time for DL or an activity we add on. That's not what disciplinary literacy is. What it is students learning how to read, write, speak, think, and do as an expert within the discipline. I know expert is a strong word, but that's what we're attempting to get to. And we have to model it for them to be able to do it. They'll never be an expert if we don't give those opportunities. We know that. If we don't model reading the authentic text and those difficult journals and data logs and that you would only see in those classrooms or in that field, they're never going to have an opportunity for it. So we have to model how to read that, how to write like that, how to think like that question in those fields. It's a lot of student talk, a lot of turn and talk with their students asking more questions than they're answering. But we want them asking more questions. If they're thinking, a lot of inquiry, a lot of modeling. If they're asking more questions, we're doing our jobs right. So we want students asking more questions. That might sound a little different, but we want them asking more questions. That if they're asking more questions, then we are doing disciplinary literacy correctly. Also, teachers interacting with students know where they are in relation to learning targets and outcomes. We say all the time that writing is visible learning. Oftentimes students are thinking, but you don't know what's going on in their head. You just ask the students to write for a minute, all of a sudden you know what's going on up here. That's the power of writing. Writing is extremely powerful. Now, if they're doing it in every content throughout the day, we now see what's happening, not just in a language arts classroom, sorry, but if they're writing in all of their content areas, that's what writing is so powerful. So just quick write, 1-2 minutes. Now every student has a chance to participate on what's going on up here instead of just guessing as to what's going on there. So they all are participating. So that's the power in writing. And our teachers at the middle school have done a phenomenal job, no matter what discipline it is, of thought journals, the writing logs. Every classroom has done a great job of getting our students writing in the classroom, no matter what discipline it is. And they're writing frequently. So there's been a great job with that. So this is kind of a good snapshot of what it is and what it isn't. Scott.
So you've heard the five big ideas of the big, what we call the big five. When we talk about any one of these, it's always in relationship to what are they doing as an expert towards that? How are they applying what they're learning and then being able to take that to make new meaning, to transfer meaning from one thing to another. But in general, what we're after is our kids being able to use all five of these. They might be a single instance where you might have kids read, but that they read, write, speak, think, and do as a result of interacting with some sort of text. But really, this is the focus. And this isn't just like what Spencer said, and it's not like we're going to do DL now. It's we integrate all these things every time we take a look at our lessons. Craig, if you could advance it. Oh, of course. So our next speaker is Jen Lloyd. She's going to talk about English language arts.
And as they already said, it's a natural kind of integration. It's not, we're doing DL. The kids know, and obviously in language arts, we read and write every day. So this was kind of an easy plug in, if you will, and integrating it into class, but it's become natural. We read, we write every day in language arts. It may be quick writes, journals, it may be extended essays. And what we have on here are just some ways that we have incorporated it throughout grades 6, 7, and 8 in ELA. We're reading novels, we're reading short stories, nonfiction pieces. We're pulling in some history pieces as well, doing some cross-curricular and helping each other out as we get there. But then we're not just writing 5-paragraph essays. We're getting them ready. They're journaling. They're writing letters. They're answering short questions. They're writing scripts. They're analyzing artwork. They're looking at pictures and coming up with captions. So they're doing some real world writing as well, rather than just the formulaic 5-paragraph essay. We're getting them to write for life, not just for school. And so these are different ways that we have kids write stories. We've had them make picture books in 8th grade where they're making children's books that can be put into our elementary libraries eventually as they develop them. 1-pagers, doodles, just different things that we can do where they are reading, they are writing, and they have to talk about it. We read, they talk, they write, they do, and they're communicating with each other. Because DL is so much more than just reading and writing, communication, because they're going to communicate for the rest of their life. They're going to read for the rest of their life. It may not be a short story, but no matter what you do, you are going to be reading, and we're giving them that foundation through some of the things that we're doing here in class.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike McNamara, and I teach 8th grade US history. And so when we're looking at this, we're looking at how one reads, especially in how one interacts in DL with the content area. One of the things that we really look at, and we really hammer with this, the ideas of how does a historian, how do they attack a primary source? And looking at this idea, we always start off with sourcing. Where's the information coming from? We talk about context. What's going on when this is being written, where it's being written, just kind of things like, and then we talk about like close reading. What's the intent of the author? And then what we try to do is we also try to use corroboration as a skill, which basically shows, well, this person did this one. Like today we're doing something on the Boston Massacre. And it was like, here's an image, here's another image. Here's the account of the general, here's the account of the town citizen. And just kind of looking at there and not saying who was right or wrong, but what happened? Like, how do you know? And so that's kind of how a historian looks. And we do this through, sometimes it's primary sources, sometimes it's text like in the Newsella that are like much more rich and they dig into an act versus a paragraph in a traditional textbook that would say this is, this, and just give you like a blank generic statement. It digs deep. And we want the kids to dig deep. We want them to be able to reason like why things are. Big thing too is images, looking at political cartoons, looking at drawings done about a particular event. And what is the author's intent? What is being communicated? Inquiry based, having the kids, be part of their owning the learning. Some of these things, the rafts, those are fun because when we give an event, an example would be, we looked at something like Bacon's Rebellion and we looked at the role. So each kid has a different role. Some of the people are the rebels, some people are the legislators, whatever. And then the audience, who are they writing, speaking to, what format? Is it a poem? Is it is it a speech? Is it a proclamation? Is somebody writing a ballad about somebody years later in history? And so like when we look at the rafts, we talk about hopefully doing some more book talks and things like that. Having kids try to find books that they like, and it's especially when we work hand in hand with like the language arts. But obviously implementing learning logs. All of these things are things that we do as historians, playing the roles of these people and basically learning and getting in their shoes versus just, we make the people a lot more, 3D versus just flat people on a paper. So that's kind of where we look when we look at social studies, we look at disciplinary literacy and history and social studies.
I am pinch hitting for Dana Del Torio. She was sick today, so I am not the face of health or PE. I can speak to this because I work closely with them. And actually, I want to give props to both Dana and Maria. They are presenting both at the state, at a local level and statewide level, at a national level on health and skills-based phys ed. So what do they really try to do in health and PE? It's the same things that they are doing in all the other disciplines, right? They're studying videos and understanding, they're studying videos and pictures to understand what people are doing, how they're doing it, especially when you look at PE, the mechanics behind the various skills that they have to do. They have a really cool reading material called Choices Magazines that they use inside of both life skills and health, which helps students understand how health relates to the children, the various topics that are important to them. We get down to goal setting and decision making. I know this is a big part of what they do because they do want students to be able to set goals that sets them up for life. Not only is it for their own health and for their own wellness, but then it's also a life skill that they take away for them. And then they go ahead and take on some of those advocacy projects within health to help grow and understand what they do both in health, PE, and in life skills.
Thanks, please. I'm Shelley Lohr. I teach 7th and 8th grade math. This discipline literacy was a little bit of a pushback from my students in math. We don't read, we don't write, we just do in math, right? So it took a little bit for the kids to kind of buy in, but I think the more that they do it, the more they were comfortable doing it. Understanding that math is a process. And so when we think about having to be able to ask questions and having to be able to think like a mathematician, it's important for us. We just assume, well, they know how to read a graph and they know how to read a table, but it's my job, our job as math teachers to help our students be able to look at things that they're going to see in the real world and things that they see every day, to be able to help them read a graph, read a table, and then be able to talk to each other, speak to each other, and be able to ask each other questions and get through things with problem solving. In math, with this discipline literacy, Relay went into a lot of like inquiry-based learning, which is important for our students to be able to think and to be able to understand how things are happening and to discover it on their own. And when they are able to work together in groups and problem solve, they can get to a lot of deeper understanding and deeper knowledge. And so this has been a great thing in math, because I think that our students, the more that they can write, the more that they can deepen their understanding. And they're seeing, and we're seeing, that they're able to understand the material better. Being able to write to understand the process, reading graphs, images, tables. And then in math, we've also been doing a lot of learning logs, and learning logs are good for me as a teacher, because I can see formally, informally what they're understanding and maybe what we need to get into a little further the next day. But just being able for them to write and understand and be able to talk through the process is important. So.
Hi, I'm Nicole Soder. I teach 6th grade science, and I brought an actual example of of what my students do, so you can see what it looks like in class. So I would say disciplinary literacy in science is curiosity, questioning, like why did that do that, or how. So I try to get them to think. So Mr. Lee, Jim Lee, the other 6th grade science teacher, we came up with Mystery Monday. So we give them a discrepant event. They don't know why or how. So last week we did this ice cube. So we put ice cube in this liquid. They don't know what the liquid is. So they record their observations. They can do it in words or drawings, and then any explanation they might have. So this was early on. And then Tuesday is Tell You Tuesday, because you just have to have alliteration. So Tuesday, I give them a little bit of the answer. So I said, okay, what do you think that was? And they said, well, oil, but it was also baby oil and vegetable oil. So that's why this ice cube is suspending in the liquid. It didn't sink all the way down to the bottom or float all the way to the top. So then we started asking, like, why? Okay, so, and this is the hard part of me not answering their questions. I have to let them get there. So, all right, what do we want to know? So we've already learned about density, and they know that the density of water is 1. Okay, so density of an ice cube would be 1 too, because water, but it's not. Density of an ice cube is 0.92. That's weird. Why? So there's all these other connections down here. So then they Googled the density of vegetable oil. 0.92. Same as the ice cube. Okay. Baby oil, 0.83. So then they put it all together. And it looks like this. So I did not give them any instructions besides to put your observations in words and or drawings. This group did a phenomenal job. So they put all their data over here and then their explanation. The baby oil is the least dense, so it's at the top. The vegetable oil has the same density as the ice, so the ice stays in the middle. Also, the water is the most dense, so when the ice cubes melted, the water layered out at the bottom too. So this is just an example of what it looks like in our class in science. Thanks.
Okay, just to kind of wrap it up real quick, the benefits for students, and there's tons of benefits culturally for the building as well, but for students, you'll see the common theme is for the students as far as the learning goes, but actively incorporate the big five. That puts the heavy lifting back on the students to be the writers, the readers, the speaking, the questioners in the classroom. We know where our students are because they're doing more of the heavy lifting in the classroom. We get an idea where our kids are as learners and where we need to intervene and move with those learning targets and outcomes, which standards we're doing a better job on in our content areas and which ones that we need to hit more. And it allows us to get to those goals better and ultimately deepen the learning for our students. And the big picture is developing the skills for lifelong learners. When we are working on these specific content skills that are authentic to these classrooms that our kids visit each day, that they're only going to see in a social studies room, a language arts room, a math room, a science room, a health room, and we're focused on those, they're going to be lifelong learners as they get older into high school and beyond, and they find their niches and they learn those skills that they only see there. They'll be lifelong learners, and we're equipping them to access that as they get older, which, you know, that's just one of the goals of our district, but we just want them to be lifelong learners. So we're trying to hit that earlier in their educational careers, and that's, you know, the big picture for DL. So thank you guys for allowing us to have this time. Yeah.
I just make one quick comment and then turn over to the board. Any comments you want? I'm going to steal her thunder maybe, but Ellen just made the most awesome statement. And she goes, I wish I could be in middle school again. And I don't know how many people we hear throughout their life that wish to be back in middle school, but that's
Pretty unexceeded development.
oh, right. And hopefully tomorrow. So the point being, and the reason we invite our guests to come each month is sometimes we sit at board meetings and we're in the community and we hear about what may or may not be happening in our classrooms. This is proof in the pudding of the experts that we put in front of our students that do simply amazing things that make us adults go, man, I wish Mrs. Hudson at Higher Middle School would have taught me that. So kudos to the job that you have done. You should be extremely proud of yourself. I'm going to be proud to be at Kalahari to watch the presentations happen, because I think as a school district, there is not a better compliment than to be chosen to present the great work that we do with our students. And our students are so fortunate to have the opportunity to share with others throughout the state of Ohio. So kudos to you. And I'm sorry if I stole anybody's thunder, but I couldn't stay silent any longer. So.
I do have 3 questions if you would kindly entertain them. I was taught I was supposed to ask questions, right? So in that vein, so with the expectation that you want to see students questioning the material and learning and challenging what they're reading, are you seeing that? Are you seeing it at a different level of engagement?
Yes, I would say it's definitively yes. I think we're seeing kids analyze, synthesize, pulling their ideas straight from the text as well as incorporating what they already know about that area and discipline.
When you hear kids talking about literature, like in the hallway or in the lunchroom, that just like, holy moly, I made a connection.
I did that, yeah. Yeah, so
Kids will ask these questions, which is happening more. And it may frustrate the kids, but it's great. And the teachers will answer the question, which is great. Because I was hoping for, but then that just gets it going even more because we don't just be the answer to them. It gets that inquiry going again. If the struggle's still there, but they're having their resources to find those answers and use the skills that we're trying to promote.
yeah, great. So are you seeing an improvement in English language arts, given all the writing across the board?
So when you say an improvement, what exactly are you asking?
Are you seeing students presenting a more comprehensive understanding of writing in English and language arts?
Yes. But it's a different type of writing
Sure.
that what they do in math, they don't necessarily do in,
Right.
but they don't write, they're writing, expressing their thoughts.
Yeah.
They are supporting their thoughts, which is always a big thing. They like to just say it
Say it, and then-
without supporting. So we're seeing that support come in. I think that's because of everyone doing.
So the other thing, just to piggyback, is the whole language arts department is a 4-year journey in growing writers in this.
Awesome.
We have brought in a literacy expert from Ohio State, who I know personally, and I met her through some other literacy things. She is coming actually tomorrow. Tomorrow we start the conversation around what does it mean to have a literacy? What does that mean about what the child is learning and where you need to take that. So not only do we have the whole EL, but we're also now we're your professional learning initiative.
Awesome.
Also with that, not necessarily talking to getting better at writing, but we did talk a lot about our students not always viewing writing as something they want to do, and they really struggle and grow when they hear, hey, we're going to write, but getting those reps throughout the day. And the point is not to sit down and write for 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time. That's not the point. But if they're getting reps of 2-4 minutes at a time throughout their day and 5, 6, 7 classes throughout the day, our stamina is increasing and they're having a much better experience doing it. So they're more apt to be not as apprehensive, doing it. Better experience around that.
And then last question. So I want to echo Ellen's sentiments. I think this is phenomenal. What should our parents be expecting to see, or should they be seeing, given that you've undertaken this initiative? What type of feedback are their students likely to be bringing home, or things that they might be saying that parents would know that, my teacher isn't helpful because they didn't answer my question. They answered it with another question.
So once in a while, I think I did it twice first quarter. I sent a video or pictures and I put it on the Google Classroom. I said, you can explain it to a trusted adult and have them send me an email or write me a note. And the parents are like, oh my gosh, they just taught me all about density. So they're telling their parents, I don't know if they're showing them the journal, but they might, and they're getting the video or the picture from Google Classroom.
I think that there's a sense of excitement, which is not measurable. So you can't walk away from, kids aren't gonna go home and say, oh, I got a whatever on my paper. They're excited about school, they're excited about learning, they're hoping that there's a transfer there while we begin this learning with this plan.
Awesome. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. I'm just really impressed.
Oh, I have a comment and question. Comment, just, I don't know that I'm gonna get this out right, but I just think it's so inspiring and invigorating to watch your passion for the instruction. We already know what an amazing job you guys do. It's the proof is in the pudding. The test scores, we all know that, but your passion for the instruction and our kids learning is just so exciting as a parent, as a board member. Thank you for that. I think to listen to you guys, I love to hear our teaching experts. The experts in instruction are sitting right in front of us. So it's just fantastic to hear you guys' voices and for the community to hear that there is fantastic instruction in density going on, learning how to in density going on in schools, not nefarious things. We're teaching them science. I do not want to go back to middle school. Sorry, I do not want to go back to middle school, but I just appreciate the work. I appreciate your expertise in reaching our students. My question is, with this approach, and I saw it in the activities that you guys are offering, and I hear the practice. I hear the rigor. I hear all of that. What about the students? Do you meet them? I heard a little bit of this. Do you meet them where they are? You don't have every student that's going to be an expert and is going to learn that entire standard. You are going to have students that are special education students, students that struggle. They're going to need access in different ways. Can you answer how you meet that? And is this available to all students in reaching all learners?
So usually when we have our commercial or talks with teachers, I use the phrase all learners. And I usually get the question back, you mean all learners? And I say, yes, we mean all learners. This is accessible to every child at every level, their disability, and that, whether they're English language learners. It's up to us to make sure they get it. And what this does is helps us to incorporate these scaffolding and approaching instructions such that every child gets what they need versus just, I gotta teach a standard or I gotta teach the concept and why they go.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna squeeze in here. First of all, Mr. Martin, thank you for a useful PD. I was just watching a TikTok today where the teacher was hiding because she needed a break from the PD she was tortured with, and we've all been there. But first of all, can we have access to the slideshow? If we click on it, we don't have access to it. That's the first thing.
I will open it up to anybody who has.
Okay, because it's a great thing for our public to see. Second of all, you didn't need an expert to come here. You guys were already great. I mean, I have a daughter who's 26 writing for Disney, and you all taught them, every one of you. So you're amazing. I'm glad that it's kept you after all these years. I really respect the fact that you're still like becoming experts at your craft, but you already were. I mean, and the proof is what we're putting out, and we're putting out people who are doing real world things, and they will tell them it's because of you guys. They, you know, right from the beginning. So I'm glad, but you guys could write a book too. I just thought I'd point that out.
I really said that.
Well,
Yeah.
you really could. You are pretty good. When I went back to teaching, I modeled myself after you guys. So really, you got it. And I'm glad that you're staying passionate because so many people are leaving, and we need the newbies to see what great looks like. And so thank you. And thank you, Mr. Martin, for bringing something useful, you know, and thank you for bringing, you know, Mr. Kinkoff for, you know, bringing somebody you knew, and that's where, you know, who cares? We don't need a publishing. We don't need other people to know about how amazing we are. All right. So thank you very much.
So yeah, this was fantastic. And, you know, to borrow some of what Tish said, your passion just comes forth, the energy, fabulous. I had 3 children go through the district, but they're adults now. So I'm not in the buildings like I used to be in the buildings. So I want to thank Jeff too for bringing some of the buildings into our board meetings so that we can all see and hear what's going on. Because you're right, Jeff, people, sometimes there's misunderstandings about what's going on in the buildings, or it's an incomplete picture. And so this is helpful. It's helpful to kind of see what type of PD is being done, and then how it's being implemented, and what we're seeing come from it, which is fantastic. The one question I have is DL just targeted for middle school, or are we doing this in the high school too?
DL can be at any level. I think it's targeted at middle school and high school just because elementary is more of a self-contained program. Discipline compartmentalized with excellence, but we're not currently doing it at the high school, but it's something we've been discussing.
Okay.
So thank you. Thank you for the long day you have put in. And many people have said it here, but I want to say it before they leave. Being a new person in the district and have an opportunity to be out in the buildings, I said this early on to Todd and Spencer. When I got the opportunity to meet the middle school staff for the first time, and then I spent an extended period of time with the 7th grade team last week, which may be where I got the cold from, by the way. So when you walk into Rexville Broadview Heights Middle School, it drips with passion. What you see here tonight is what you feel walking the hallways. So if I could stand on the tallest building around and tell people how fortunate we are to have the staff and the culture within our middle school, it is something special. And I say that coming from an outsider's perspective. I didn't live here. Wasn't raised here. I didn't go to school here. I didn't teach here. So I'm bringing a perspective from outside of our community into our community. And I tell you, that building is a special place. And if you don't believe me, then give me a call, send me an email, and I'd be more than happy to be in that building with you so you can see it happening. And it's something different. I said it last spring when I met with the team, and the feedback I got and the welcome that I got and what they show for their students is simply amazing. I don't say that just because they're here, but because they are here, I want to make sure that they take this back to their colleagues and just keep doing the great work that you're doing. And thank you for the work you're doing. And do not feel bad exiting stage left.
Right.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you.
I know when we bring guests and presentations, I told Mr. Rings, I said, hey, that's earlier today, I said, we're in that 10 to 15 minute range, right? I know darn well we're never gonna hit it. I know we're never gonna hit it. No, strong passion. So it does extend our meetings a little bit, but this is the stuff we should be talking about and celebrating. And so your point, Mark, is we need a greater understanding with our community of the great work we do. When you have kids that go through the building and you witness it, like Kathleen and Tish both said, well, not everybody in our community has kids that have gone through our middle school. It's a special place. So I'll try to pick up the pace a little bit for us, but do justice to the items that are on the agenda. The next one is strategic planning process. This is something you've heard me talk about from the day one you met me in the interview process, that we need to have a strategic plan, and a strategic plan that is actionable, that is measurable, and will move our district forward. The overarching theme of what this strategic planning process is our stakeholders will be involved. And our stakeholders involve community members, involve staff, and they will direct the direction of our district. We want to hear from them, but we also want a strategic plan that we can move on. We only have our students at the high school, for example, for 4 years. So I don't need a 5-year strategic plan because that's a lot of time that we've missed with students. So when we talk about strategic planning, we're talking a 3-year strategic plan that has manageable goals and objectives specifically assigned to members of the administrative team and our staff to be able to carry out. So you will see a very aggressive timeline for the 23-24 school year of the strategic planning process. The first quarter or first 2 quarters almost is simply onboarding for me and understanding the operations of the districts, knowing what we do well, what we may need or have opportunities for improvement in, and just getting a general feel for the district while meeting many of the stakeholders, both within our district and outside of our district. Then we get into the second phase of this, which is January and February, where we're going to do the identification of core beliefs and values. Then we kind of move into February. We're going to do a SWOT analysis. In each one of these steps, we're going to be bringing segments of our community in to hear from them. Because when Craig and I and the administrative team have to make important decisions about the allocation of resources, both financial and capital, we want to do it in a way that is valued by our community and is in the direction and spirit of what our community wants from their local public school system. So we need that North Star. We don't need them to do the work for us, that we need them to set us on the track of the direction they want their public school to go in. So in February, we start talking a lot about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A SWOT analysis will be done. Moving into March, we're talking about mission statement reevaluation. April is vision statement. May, June, and throughout the summer, we're identifying what are our SMART goals going to be in this strategic plan. What are we hoping to accomplish over the next 3 years that will move our district forward and at the benefit of our community, and most importantly, our staff and students. So we will write that plan over the summer. We will work as an administrative team identifying its MAP, its most accountable person, because through this process, we have a beautiful strategic plan of years of this great binder that when you flip through it, it has awesome work in it. And when I was interviewing, I started to sweat when I flipped through these pages thinking, who is doing all of this work? It was great work. And COVID complicated a lot of things. But even if COVID wasn't around, I'd still question, was that a realistic plan to move through within the 4 to 5 year window? It's not about a grandiose plan. It's about being real and moving our district forward because we have a limited amount of time with students. So you will see myself come back to you in September with a submission to the Board of Education and the administrative leadership team for approval going, this is it. Here's the stamp of approval, make these things happen. And that will lead us into the future as a district. Throughout this planning process, the Board of Education currently and new members who come onto it will be interlaced throughout the whole process. But a lot of their work though, and my work even, will be listening and hearing what our community is saying and the direction they want to go. So yes, we're involved, but we're on kind of the back burner, listening and watching it play out. And then when we get to the point that we want to make progress, it'll be listed in this room, and every board meeting we have, I'd welcome anybody to say, where are we on goal number 5, Jeff? Where are we and what progress have we made? And you will see regular updates from the superintendent and from the administrative team as to where we are as a district moving forward. So this is an aggressive timeline, but if you ask me, the iron is hot, now's the time to strike. This also helps a new superintendent coming into a school district understand the values of the school district. I said it earlier, there's a certain level of service that people believe that Brecksville Broadview Heights should be offering. And I hear it from people. I hear it from staff. I hear it from community members. But I also hear other staff and community members want to be fiscally responsible. We have to find out where that balance is. And before we start talking about the need for additional funding for a school district, which we all know is coming at some point in time because of the way schools are funded, before we ask for additional support, we need to know and understand the direction we're heading as a district and what it's going to cost. And that's where this process and new leadership that has come in, now is the time to move forward with this. We will be working with Jim Crooks, who currently works with us with communication to help facilitate this process. We will bring in some experts in the field of information gathering, which I can share some of those details for those who want to really dig into that. We will both have in-person meetings to gather data, and through those in-person meetings where we gather data, we will also generate questions that will go out in a community-wide survey. That survey will go out paper pencil, it will go out electronic, it will also have phone interviews at random with community members, because it's not just the people that show up at the meeting. We've got to touch all parts of our community if we do a strategic planning process accurately. And I'm excited for it. If you can't tell, I'm ready to get started on it. And ultimately what it does is it holds, I'll say it, it holds me accountable to continue to move the district forward. And when I say me, it's me and our administrative team and our staff throughout the whole district that are going to make this happen. So that's the strategic planning process in a nutshell. And I'll take any comments or questions or concerns of the like. Or I'll just move on to the next item on the agenda.
No, it's all good. Craig, can you put the video back up in the corner just so if people are watching, they can actually.
So before anybody asks, I know people will say, well, what's this going to cost? Strategic planning of the past in a district like Brecksville Broadview Heights, or maybe even in Brecksville Broadview Heights, a strategic planning process to create a plan for a 5-year period, you were looking at anywhere between $40,000 to $60,000 for that process. This process is more real, and it uses our people and our sources that we already do. We will not exceed $20,000 with this, doing this plan. So it is fiscally conservative. It is fiscally responsible. It is bringing experts in because we need a third party involved at a certain degree, because people are going to say things to that third party that they would never say to the superintendent or to a principal or to a staff member. So we need that ability for a community member who may have critical feedback to not hold back and not be afraid to say very critical things about the district. So moving on, if no questions. Traffic study, campus master planning. Talked about it a little bit in the permanent improvement presentation that was taking place. Here, the city of Brecksville invited me in. We had a conversation with the engineer about the study that took place on the Mill Road corridor last year. That, of course, that corridor or that traffic study encompasses both Brecksville and Broadview Heights. And that traffic study gave a list of recommendations of things that could help improve traffic flow on Mill Road, especially during the peak times of arrival and dismissal. The city, Brecksville, being proactive because mainly the log jam or concern of traffic happens on the Brecksville side of Mill Road for the most part. There is some on the Brecksville or Broadview Heights side, but Brecksville in particular. They have the suggestions. They are going to update crosswalks. They are going to put up additional signage and things of that nature that are kind of low cost. But then they have medium and high cost things that the traffic studies suggests. But before they start their budgeting process or capital funds, they want to see and make sure what we're doing as good neighbors and as a school district with our campus. And if we are going to be making any changes to schedule or buses or entrances at Hilton or putting access roads in, they want to know all of that before they invest any major dollars on Mill Road. And I can't blame them for that. And what we need to do as good neighbors is make sure that we're wired tight and we understand what we're going to be doing with our campus and the flow of traffic. And are we going to use the Hilton entrance and exit onto campus, which would mean extending a road or putting a road in? So we need to have those conversations. I have this here because in the permanent improvement committee meeting, I'm asking for support from the Board of Education to move forward with sending out an RFQ and begin engaging with experts to formulate a campus master plan. And we're not talking about building new buildings necessarily, but we're talking about the layout of the acreage that we have, traffic pattern, where ideal things could be placed on our campus. So I bring this here, letting you know that this conversation and the phone calls, I don't get as many anymore because teenage drivers begin to learn how to get in and out of the board entrance. People have become more patient to wait their turn. It is a backup, but if they're patient and allow it to happen, it happens. And it in and out every single day. And we thank Broadview Heights for the police officer at the middle school entrance that helps facilitate that. Currently, Brecksville and the school district do not determine or deem that it was necessary to have a police officer at this entrance. That is debatable. I understand that. But we're having a conversation of long-term and not just tomorrow and the next day. So we need to move forward with that campus master planning so that we can give some assurance to Brecksville in particular that, you know, how things may or may not change on our campus. So they're there to read and you can see the suggestions. I do not want to set it on fire and tell people we're putting a roundabout in, even though a roundabout is a suggestion in the report on Mill Road, or 450 foot worth of a left turn lane, which would require some room on individuals' property. So I don't want to get people super excited that those things are happening in the spring, because they're not. But before the city determines the direction they want to go, they want to know where we're going, and we're going to be a good neighbor and do that. So that's the traffic study campus master plan. I also have shared with the board tonight a naming rights draft policy. At the last board meeting, I gave you sample drafts. Thank you to the board members who gave a lot of feedback as to what you liked and didn't like in the different policies. I have created the draft policy, which you have in front of you tonight. So how I would see this playing out is between now and our next board meeting, digest it, critique it. Are we covering it? One thing I want to warn you with is there is some feedback that I've received from board members and other admin when talking about this that will absolutely be part of this, but that's in the contract. So you have a policy that gives us the ability to name something and how we would go about it. But then you're going to have a contract between the district and that partner that would spell out the term, the financials, you know, all that kind of stuff. So there may be things you go, boy, I really wish it was in this policy. It's not in the policy, but it's going to be in the agreement that will be reviewed by legal counsel. Just remember that. So this is here for you to digest. I would suggest at our November meeting, I will be bringing this policy as a first read. Second read in December, approve policy after that is kind of the time frame for it. So you have time to give it a look, as well as for our public to give it a look and provide feedback. Item F. Community newsletter. This is just a preview. I do not believe it's hit mailboxes yet, but it will before November 7th. What the district had done during the construction of the elementary building, I think it was all about the buzz or something like this, was a newsletter that was sent out on updates on the building. From my understanding, the district received a lot of positive feedback about that mode of communication. So we are going to continue with a community-wide newsletter mailing, direct mailing to our community on a quarterly basis, where we're providing all kinds of great information about what's going on, Craig's financial information, other type of reminders that will happen. And this is the finished product that no matter how many eyes you have look at something, I'm not kidding you. We have looked and looked and looked, and there's a typo that will be a competition to find in there. And it just happens to be on the national merit semifinals. I guess the The last thing we should have done was give this newsletter to the National Merit finalists, and maybe they would have corrected it for us. So, yes. So that is, it will show up in your mailbox very soon. And that is it for superintendent's announcements.
Just a quick comment on the naming rights policy. Thank you for the work you did to try to take the various samples and then weave them together into a draft for us to digest, look at. I really liked what you came up with. My sense of it is that, it provides guardrails about, what's allowable, but there's a whole lot of room in the middle for board judgment, basically, in a whole range of areas. So it looks like there's a lot of latitude in there to kick it to the board to kind of make final decision about, is this appropriate? What's it worth? What, duration, all these things.
How we should operate right there, right? We can be presented with a lot of things, but ultimately for the school district, 5 members of the Board of Education who represent our community make the yay or nay on if we think it's appropriate or not.
Yeah. So any other comments or questions before we move on?
Yeah, I do have a question. So some of the draft policies that you provided us with, I think 2 out of the 4 had a provision that said, I think it was at least in one of them, like, and I know this is just a naming rights and consideration, because they're set, which is separate from naming rights and but it provided that 51% of a contribution to a project or to, anything would give you naming rights. And then in the draft that's now on the agenda, that part is not included. I'm curious as to how you.
I think we still have that standard of what we believe is correct, because 51% could be depending on what facility we're talking about and what type of investment it may be. We can still use that as a decision making as to if we're going to move forward with this naming project or not. But to put it into the policy will nix any type of investment that's all the way up to 49%. Of the project. So we want to, like Mark said, put the guardrails in so we don't go off the cliff and go crazy. But through the process of walking through this policy, we're going to be talking about, well, what is market value to put your name on something too? Because it may be more than 51%. So I didn't include it in this policy. It could still be included. This is still draft format. But what I'm thinking is those are decision-making factors we take into account as we're determining if it's appropriate or not. And we internally can use those standards as something that we'd want to measure it by.
Okay, I just kind of, and I'm just putting this out there. I feel like if there is a number in there, it leaves, it just leaves less, the board less open to criticism or less open to comment, because you already have something that's been baked into it. If that, so anyway.
Definitely take into consideration.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I feel like, if you give the board like completely unlimited discretion, that could be problematic too. I don't know.
And remember, and I know the policy, the way it's written, it makes it appear that it's all on the board. I will tell you, I'm not bringing you a recommendation unless it passes some of those, I'll call sniff tests. Does it smell right? Does it taste right? Does it look right? Is it something that I believe is best for our district? That's my job, to bring you that recommendation. And it's my job to say, well, it's 10% of what it's going to be to replace the turf in the stadium. I'm not letting somebody put their name on the stadium for 10% of that project. But what if it was 47%? I'd look at Craig and go, that's $300,000. Do we want the $300,000? So that's why I don't want to necessarily nail us to that percentage, but those are conversations that we have to have through the recommendation process. But I don't disagree with what you're saying.
No, that makes sense though. What for districts that already have naming rights policies in effect, do you know of any district like around here that's like encountered any issues, or does this seem to be working well?
I think it seems to be working well. Sometimes people will mistake naming rights for sponsorship. So you have to be very clear in what we're talking about. Are we naming something, or is it more of a sponsorship agreement? And they will run parallel and intersect at times. And I would tell you, North Royalton has a very robust sponsorship type of foundation work that they do for their athletic facilities. And if you've been over to North Royalton lately, there's turf going in on the baseball field. There's turf going in on the softball field. There are locker rooms being built. There are stadium improvements being built. And these are all things that they have a separate foundation that is all about improving athletic facilities. So a lot of information and experience and just trying to plan ahead of time are coming through some of those relationships with Superintendent Lobb or Bo Kuntz, who's the athletic director over there, or even Ed Batardi, which we all know, who had spent a lot of time in North Royalton and is part of that board. They shared a lot of their marketing materials and how they went about raising those funds. So this allows us to at least now we can go to people and say, you know, I hate to say it this way, for the right amount of money, we can put your name on something. And we have a process of doing it. So all checks welcome.
Yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, there's that balance on what do you weave into the policy, into those guardrails, and you know that challenge I have is if you did put something like a 51% or 50.1%, you know, then you could get into, well, we're renovating the gym and the scoreboard is not 50%, but we're going to carve just the scoreboard out as a separate line item and now you're saying now you can get over, you know what I'm saying? It's like you could start fudging things to say, well, geez, we really want that $200,000 of investment, but as part of the bigger project, it doesn't hit the 51% mark. So let's rejigger what our project is so that hits the 50.
And the policy is it's a dance, right? And we saw it even before I was hired, but I was kind of acting superintendent with the student code of conduct for athletics. Remember, we had a handbook that had a drug, alcohol, and tobacco policy in it that they had brought stakeholders together to make adjustments to it, like most districts do. And we were ready to go. And luckily, a board member said, whoa, I think that's board policy. I'm like, what do you mean that's board policy? Sure enough, we had board policy that was comma, period, word for word, what is in the handbook. And that's not typical. Typical, you have a policy that's a statement that says it will leave all student code of conduct up to the handbook. So you're not having to change policy every time you want to adjust things. So that's the dance we talk about. You want policy that gives the guardrails, but isn't painting us into the lane. So.
Anything else? Okay, we're moving on. Item 9, treasurer's announcements. Turn it over to Craig.
I have nothing for announcements. We're gonna move this right along. Forecasts come next month.
All right, very good. Item 10 is here to the public. Do we have people that want to be heard?
Saved by the bell, Mr. Bundy.
Okay.
Roger Bundy.
So let me read. Hearing of the public, persons wishing to address the Board of Education may do so at this point. No formal action will be taken on subjects that are not included on this agenda until the board has had an opportunity to study them. Comments regarding personnel must be submitted in writing through the office of the superintendent in order for the board to complete the planned agenda in an effective and efficient manner and to provide sufficient opportunities for members of the public to be heard. Hearing of the public shall be limited to a maximum of 60 minutes, during which time each speaker shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. And just to be fair, I will put a timer on. Let me get to my timer just to make sure everybody's treated equitably. So, all right. And if you hear the timer go off, then obviously.
Quick 3 minutes.
You're done. Was not my, thank you for sharing your comments this evening.
Ron Bundy, 8219 Wright Road, Broadview Heights. So I wasn't planning on speaking, but the presentation at the middle school, I have a parent perspective of this. My youngest daughter is an 8th grader. So she's gone through this process for 2 years. I didn't know what it was called. I knew something was happening. I'm so excited to hear that presentation because now I can put like what's happening behind it. But I can tell you as a parent, I have absolutely seen a difference. I have a freshman at BG who's an excellent writer who had almost all of those teachers. She lacks confidence. She doesn't know how good of a writer she is. Her professor routinely, consistently puts up her paper as the example for the freshman class. This is the way you're supposed to do it. She just lacks self-confidence. My 13-year-old, who's an 8th grader, has all those skills and more, but has the confidence. She knows she can challenge and question and do those things. So I want to offer as a parent, my congratulations to the middle school there. And I go to the parent-teacher nights and I hear the passion for the teachers. And I don't really want to go back to middle school, but what I say is like, I wish I went to this middle school when I was in middle school. So congratulations.
Great. Thank you for your comments. And I guess just to clarify too, I'm going to pass on middle school. Oh, so All right. We're going to move on. Item 11, other board business. Item A, resolve to approve the new revised board policies as attached. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have any?
Only a slight adjustment I want to call to everybody's attention is policy 9211, our district support organizations. I want to thank members of our PSO who took the time to read through policy and point things out to the new guy in particular. But we have a high level of involvement of staff members who participate in PSO, but athletic boosters and different things. And best practice doesn't always apply to every single district the same way. So what we did and why we have that period between reading 1 and reading 2, so we can make adjustments and make it best for BBH. So in there said that if you are an employee of the school district, you cannot be a voting member. Well, you pay your PSO entry fee, you're technically a voting member. Same with a lot of the booster organizations. So we struck that. We took that out. Because remember, this policy is best practice to make sure that employees don't do or make bad choices that could jeopardize their employment. And it really falls on the certified side when we talk about licensure and ethics and all of that. That's what we're trying to protect against with that policy in particular. Also said you cannot be an executive board member or have responsibility for the organization's funds. So we adjusted it. We took out the executive member piece and we said sole possession of organization's funds. So if we have a secretary in our district who has multiple children in our district and they're the treasurer of the PSO, there needs to be a co-treasurer. There needs to be another person involved. They shouldn't be handling and responsible for money solely if you're an employee. We just don't want to put our employees in that position. Not saying that we have untrustworthy employees, but anytime you have cash and you have funds, mistakes are made. Auditors will tell you if your audit is always 110% correct, something might be going on because there's natural mistakes, believe it or not. So back to my days as athletic director, when you have a ticket seller who always balances, they might be fudging the numbers a little bit because they're afraid to say, I gave an extra $1 out or I miscounted the tickets. So auditors, when they come in, would be kind of acute to that and go, wait a second, we have some great ticket sellers that never are off on their drawer. So things like that. We just don't want to put our, long story short, thanks to our community for giving some feedback during this time, adjustment made. So tonight's vote roll call will make these official.
Great. Any comments or questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes. Motion carries 4-0. Item C. Resolve to approve the attached resolution to allow provisional changes to board policy and administrative guidelines and forms to comply with HB 33. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
What we're looking at here, again, best practice by Neola, giving us this resolution that we are in the midst of a transition from ODE to DEW, the do, or some will say do. So it was there was a court injunction trying to stop it from happening. That has now been allowed to continue to transition. Inevitably, it's happening. And we need to make sure that our district, with all of our policies, multiple places of policy will reference ODE or reference the state superintendent and things of that nature, State Board of Education. So this resolution is recognizing that we understand that ODE is transitioning because there's still going to be an ODE, but they're going to have limited abilities and responsibilities, and you have a new do. So instead of having to go through every single policy and then in the coming weeks to correct those, this resolution saying we recognize that and will help cover us in that instance. If somebody wants to go, well, you're not following your policy because your policy is incorrect because it says ODE. We know that. So that's what this resolution is.
Any questions or comments?
No, my question was gonna be, but that just explained it. I mean, when I read it, but I had still was like, when you read some of our stuff, it's still referencing everything, and this is covering that. So
correct. And this is not like a vote of endorsement that we're happy about a DEW.
No.
It's more or less, policy is never a problem until it's a problem. And then sometimes when you get into
Right.
policy, they're looking at every word and every period and stuff. So we're just making it where we're aware there's a change that's happening.
Yeah, I did just want to comment because I understand that there was no injunction. However, it's my understanding that law very well could be unconstitutional. So I don't know that I want to be involved in approving something that
Right.
likely is unconstitutional.
It's like school funding, right? So I get it.
Okay, roll call.
Mrs. Kramer,
No.
Mrs. Kwiatkowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mr. Dosen.
Yes, motion carries 3-1. Item E, appointment of new district CVCC board representative. So what we have here is our current representative is Jim Gilbride, and his term, 3-year term, is ending at the end of this year. So the board will need to identify a new representative for the CVC board sometime before early January. And they did this is what the document that's posted here talks about, the responsibilities of the board members, which for the most part, they have 10 meetings a year. So we usually have one a month. They have one a month for 10 months. And then they may have additional meetings, but for the most part, the requirements are a little bit lighter than what they would be to be on this board. And so the requirements also of who can serve is pretty broad and open right now. So it's really going to be up to us, the board, to figure out who we would want and how we go about that. So the obvious thing would be to start with the board and find out, does anybody have any ideas or names that they want to talk to somebody to see if they might be interested? And if we're not able to come up with some candidates ourselves, or even if we are, we could also throw it out to our communities to say, hey, we have this position open. If you have an interest, get in touch with us. So I guess some of the question would be, unless Jeff,
And
you have-
a current sitting school board member could also serve in that role. I just want to throw, I know that hasn't been practiced here of recent, but that is possible. The ability to serve on a career center board has changed over the years. You used to have to be in a specific field or industry to be able to serve. And even if you were a current board member, you had to be like a business owner or in a certain field to serve. It is no longer like that. And if you want to talk about moving and shaking in education today, career centers is where it's happening. So if you are really passionate about career readiness, and that doesn't mean that a kid isn't going to go to a college university, we're talking career readiness. This is an awesome opportunity to serve and see the wonderful opportunities that our students get an opportunity to take part in. We currently have about 160 students who attend CVCC a half-day programming, just to kind of give you a perspective of that. And our enrollment at the Career Center is climbing. The Career Center of today is not the Career Center of when we were in schools. Many times it's called the Joint Vocational Center. My own child, my youngest, attends Medina County Career Center in the Criminal Justice Program. And I can tell you it has changed him in 1 quarter. He's a great kid, but his discipline, his motivation to get out of bed in the morning, he's in the criminal justice. They wear uniform. He literally polishes his boots multiple times a week because he has to. His hair can only be a certain length. And it's just awesome. I'm thinking, oh, this is not going to work. Or I'm talking to Pam. I'm like, I don't know about this. He's thriving after 1 quarter. So this is an awesome opportunity. And I want to thank, I've only met him at one meeting, but I want to thank Jim for his service, because it's important to represent our school district on that board. And if you have any questions, or you want a tour, or you want to meet the superintendent over there, I'm more than happy to make those arrangements for anyone.
So I think what I'd like to suggest is our meeting next month is early because of Thanksgiving. We're meeting on the 15th, which is only 3 weeks from now. Is maybe our current board members give it some thought. There is going to be an election where 7 candidates are running for 3 spots. So there will be 4 people who don't get elected that they also might be interested to see, because it is another opportunity to serve on a board. And maybe we can revisit this next month and then find out, if we have any people that might be interested. If anybody knows of anybody and wants to reach out to them and talk to them and kind of get a sense of if they're interested, and then bring that back, then we can see maybe next month if we have some people who might be interested. And if not, what we want to do in terms of maybe reaching out to our community to see if people might be interested. And now that this is a public meeting too, if there is anybody interested out there and hearing this, certainly reach out to us if you have an interest, and we'll kind of put you on the list and we'll revisit this next month. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, I think that sounds like I like that idea. I do have one question. So I have been on the board for almost 6 years, and Mr. Gilbride has been the CBC rep that entire time. So I'm actually not familiar with how he acquired that.
Oh, so yeah,
I am.
go ahead.
I mean, they had a whole, so the last time, because I went for that, I'm very passionate about career education. My son went to CVCC, had a great experience, has had a great outcome, and is getting a degree in what he started there, computer programming. But when you guys appointed, I was rejected and they chose someone else, but at the time, I don't think you could fill it, or you didn't have someone. So you put it out to the community and then went through an interview process to be put on board. Am I correct, Mark?
Well, yeah, back when we did that, the state changed the rules so that the person it couldn't be a board member back then. So we prior to that, we had a board member serve on. And then they changed the rules and they kind of made it very restrictive. Like you had to be a business owner, or you had to have certain professional exposure to be able to even qualify. And so that's how we ended up getting Mr. Gilbride, because he checked the boxes of the professional experience.
Okay.
But now they've softened it to say,
Wide
you know
open.
what?
It's literally wide open.
Yeah.
Resident of our district.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I didn't have that background. You know what I mean? Mhm.
Do we want to provide our community with some clarity as to who they should reach out to in their like, Mark, do you want to be the point person? Do we want to direct them to? Mr.
Sure,
Harrison?
you could just email me,
Okay.
email the board president, and then, we'll kind of put anybody that shows interest, we'll kind of put them on the list.
Okay.
And then, we'll get to next month and then see.
There's contact information on an information sheet as well for the superintendent over at the Career Center too, if you wanted to dig even deeper.
Okay. And you also feel free, if you go on to CVCC's website, they have their current board members. Jim Gilbride's there. He's the representative for our school district. You could feel free to reach out to Jim also if you want a better sense of what that role looks like and how much time commitment it is, and what his experience has been.
When I spoke to the superintendent, Dave, his comment was, we just want people who want to learn about what we do here and then celebrate it. It's good stuff.
Right.
It's fantastic. Fantastic.
Item 12, superintendent's other business. Item A, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 Achievement Centers for Children Camp Cheerful Group Agreement as attached. Item B, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 America's Best Transportation Contract as attached. Item C, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 Mindfully Agreement Amendment as attached. Item D, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 PSI Service Agreement as attached. Item E, resolve to approve the 2023-2024 STEPS Educational Group Service Contract as attached. Item F, resolve to approve the BBH High School Robotics Team Overnight Field Trips as attached. Item G, resolve to approve the Classified Contract Amendment Resolution as attached. Item H, resolve to approve the attached resolution declaring transportation impractical for the 2023-2024 school year. Item I, resolve to approve the classified substitute rates as attached. Item J, resolve to approve superintendent's other business items A through I. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Jeff.
Yes. So again, we see a lot of these same names from time to time because contracts need to be amended or changed due to student need and the students with special needs in particular. But I want to highlight a couple. First one, the Achievement Center of Children Group Agreement. This is a program that is supported by our wonderful foundation, and it is some therapy sessions for some of our special needs students. and just is an awesome opportunity. So we want to thank our foundation for that financial support to make that possible. America Best Transportation is a transportation company. It's one of a few different ones. Suburban Transportation is another one that we use. There is a typo within this contract that I don't believe is of substance. I will check with them to get that corrected. If it is of substance, it needs to come back to us. I will bring it back, but I truly think it's just a typo, and we'll be able to make that adjustment. The Mindfully agreement, again, for some of our students who, this one actually has to do with some verbiage in the contract about their employees not having BBH emails. This is just amending the contract so that they can to have better efficiency with communication. D is PSI service agreement. These are contract for Assumption Academy services for the 23-24 school year. Would you like to explain why we have to approve this?
Well, so Assumption is what they consider an auxiliary service to the district. So we are the fiscal agent for their state funds. So we're just a fiscal agent. They pay us 4% of what they of the total amount that they get from the state as a servicing fee. So we do the purchase orders. We have to accept the contracts. So the district is not paying for this in any way. And then we're also being compensated with 4% in administrative fees to cover the cost, like the purchasing process and all of those things. So we manage their funds, and we're actually getting our audit done, another audit. Jack Maris is coming on Monday to do an auxiliary audit. So
STEPS is just a placement for a special ed student. The next one is a robotics team. I want to thank the advisors of the robotics team because their detail in their field trip request is awesome. You might even be able to tell what they had for lunch, let alone when they had lunch or that they had lunch. And you'll notice that one of these has already happened. We're approving the Tennessee one retro. Reason for that, and that will happen with field trip approvals. I gave approval for them to go. That is within our policy. But it happens with athletic teams too, who qualify for state tournaments, and we don't have a board meeting coming up. We don't want to stop kids from participating because we didn't get to do the board action on it. So one of them is retro. The rest are for the rest of the competition season. I'm excited to see one of these for the first time. And I'm looking forward to it because they are extremely passionate.
There is another typo on the Riverbox.
Okay.
It says it's leaving on December 15th, 2022.
Yeah, that wouldn't be 2022. So I will make sure we get that adjusted. Thank you, Ellen, for catching that. Item G is classified contract amendment. This is nothing more than making an adjustment to a contract sequence that was done improperly in the past. So it's an update. Payment in lieu of transportation. This is something you're going to see from time to time for students that we have to transport outside of our district to other schools. Classified sub rates. This is one I want to spend just a slight bit of time on. And if you could pull that attachment up, Craig, that'd be great. What I'm proposing here and what I'll say we are proposing as an administrative team is to increase our sub bus driver rate, hourly rate. You will see that it currently is $17.50, and we want to increase that to $21. At $17.50, we are not competitive necessarily in the market. There are still some that are a little more than us. There are some that are a little less than us. This makes us much more competitive. And what essentially we want to do is retain the subs that we have so that they don't go to a neighboring district for $1 more or $1.50 more. We want to make sure we keep them, but this is one that we need to address. We're getting to the point where every driver, they all matter, but every sub driver, we got to have them. We don't want to lose them. So this is hopefully be able to do that. Another tactic that we're going to try is we're going to have 2 sub drivers that we will call standby drivers, meaning they're coming and they're getting 4 hours. If we need them or don't need them, ladies and gentlemen, we need them every day. So it's not like we're going to pay somebody not to work. If we ever get to the situation where we have a standby driver who's guaranteed 4 hours a day, they report at 6 a.m., no route available to them, we will send them to other places in the district to assist. Right now, if that happened, what we need them to do is we need them to drive the in lieu of payment. We have to drive those routes to prove that they're not practical, but we have to drive them during the hours that they would be driven. We can't do that right now because we don't have enough drivers to drive our routes, let alone do that work. So when you hear me say that we want to employ standby drivers, it is not a waste of money. It is not fiscally irresponsible. It is trying to be market competitive. Other districts around us do it. And we want to dip our toe in that. So when people say to me, or they call or email me with complaints about buses being on time or not on time or doing double backs. They always are very understanding and know the situation we're in as a state or nationally, but they always ask me, what are you doing to correct the problem? Well, today, or hopefully after tonight, we have increased our sub rate to be competitive, market competitive, and we're going to look to secure some standby drivers to help in that last minute call off, because that's where it hurts. Last Friday is a perfect example. Last Friday was probably the most difficult day for transportation. Fonzie and his team did everything possible to cover all the routes, and they got them covered. Yes. Were they a little later, a little earlier? Did they double back? Yes. But the point being is we didn't have to cancel routes. Talk to friends in other districts. My previous experience, I still get the calls. I would tell you 2 to 3 times a week, I'm getting the automated calls that they're canceling routes. And that's letting parents know at the last minute, oh, by the way, that bus isn't available today, figure it out. And it hurts when it's an illness. The morning of, the driver gets sick or their children get sick. Luckily, we've been able to cover our routes. Kudos to our bus drivers, our transportation department, especially last Friday. They did a great job. So that's what the classified substitute rates are. And that would be it.
Any questions or comments?
My comment is that I don't want to go back to middle school, but I would go on a robotics field trip.
That'd be pretty cool.
Right?
There's one at Kalahari. We can all go up there.
Yeah. But to your point about, working in other districts, the transportation needs are real. The deficits in drivers is real. So whatever we can do I'll support us keeping our drivers.
They do a great job. It goes a long way to let them know they're doing a great job.
Yes.
And I try to do that as much as I can.
And so from the board, drivers, if you hear this, thank you. If you're watching or
Unsung heroes.
yes, Mr. Harrison, please give the board's appreciation to them.
Yes, and drivers that are not with us, we've just raised our pay.
Yeah.
You can apply online.
We need you.
Yeah.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Ms. Sprykowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes, motion carries 4-0. Item 13, superintendent's personnel recommendations. Item A, resolve to approve certified personnel recommendations. Item B, resolve to approve classified personnel recommendations. Item C, resolve to approve superintendent's consent items A through B. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Certified, a huge shout out to Karen Graham. She has submitted her retirement letter and will be retiring effective May 31st, 2024, after 36 years of service in public education. So
She was my 3rd grade teacher.
Yeah.
she
I
has
wish her the
done
best
a
of luck.
wonderful job and has served our gifted population as well throughout the years. And I've had the opportunity to meet with Karen this year, and just a huge congratulations. We wish you all the best. Still have a year to finish, but she's ready. She turned the letter in and she knows when she's going. So congratulations to Karen.
Great.
Classified side. We have one contract revision. We have some recommendations, lots of substitutes, and then 2 resignations on there.
Okay, any comments or questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Ms. Sprykowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes, motion carries 4-0. Item E, resolve to approve supplemental personnel recommendations. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, pull them up, just.
Seeing lots of our winter sports teams, athletic coaching. We also have some high school clubs that I always throw out the shout out to those individuals who are volunteering their time for extra opportunities for our students.
And then were there athletic workers there too?
I think there's just two.
Right. Okay, any other comments or questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Ms. Kwiatkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes, motion carries 4-0. Item 14, Treasurer's Consent Agenda. Item A, resolve to approve the financial reports as attached. Item B, resolve to accept donations as presented. Item C, resolve to approve the student activity budgets for FY24 as attached. Item D, resolve to approve the minutes from the September 27th, 2023 regular board meeting as attached. Item E, resolve to approve treasurer's consent items A through D. May I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, Craig, you're up.
Okay. There it is. Okay, so this is as of September. These are the financials. So I've done some different color shading this month so we can see a little more clearly. So everything in purple is actuals. So the month we're looking at is obviously September. We did not get the homestead rollback in the month of September, so you'll see that on the state side of the reimbursement amount. So we do have decreased revenue over last year, but a total of $874,000 that was brought in on the revenue side. Expenditures of $5.1 million. September was a 3-pay month for us. So that is the main reason why we see such a large discrepancy. So I will indicate over here to the right, we're still doing pretty close to where the projections were, I guess, in terms of the prior forecast. We'll be fine tuning this over the next couple of weeks to present the 5-year forecast on November 15th with all of the updated information that we may have. Now we finally got our state amounts. So that just came in the month of October. Like, what month are we in now? So here on the left side right here, we're comparing September of last year to September of this year. And again, the reason for that is because the homestead rollback was in September last year. We actually just received the homestead rollback this year, last week, I think. So I don't know why it necessarily matters from year to year that it's that far off in terms of when we received the funds, but we just got them. So otherwise the revenues were consistent year over year. On the expenditure side, again, that is mostly due to the fact that we had a 3-pay month in the month of September. That's going to happen again in March. But with those 3 pays, that's why we see the increase over last September. Purchase services and supplies were down from last year at the same time as well. We look at the overall picture. So we see on the revenue side, we are well above, which is good, but on the expenditure side, we're also well above. At the end of the day, we're somewhat consistent with what the forecast said, and that would put us at a small deficit for the year with a decrease in cash balance down to $24.4 million. And then the last graph is just comparing year over year. So again, that would be attributed, the revenue loss would be the difference there between the green and the blue lines would be because of the homestead rollback. And then we're doing pretty consistent on the expenditure side between year over year, fiscal year to date expenditures, July through the end of September in 22 versus 23, or yeah, 22 versus 23. Any questions? So far I would say holding steady with what we thought so far. Again, we'll be diving into some of the final, like the salary projections, just because everything has taken effect now with all the new contracts, as well as evaluating any of the purchase services and supplies, but nothing super alarming at the moment, other than the discussion we'll be having with healthcare. So the one thing that we are waiting for that I would plug in at the last minute is that our consortium has been meeting and nobody planned for a potential mid-year increase. So we're trying to work around that as a consortium right now. As you remember, we took a 13% increase in healthcare costs for this year. Our consortium has burned through almost $20 million in deficit spending over the past 2 years after a record high of reserve amount during COVID. We're looking at all options. If we don't make any changes and move forward, we could be looking at a 10% increase by March. And that is something that we have not planned for. Nobody in our consortium, which is 22 different schools in the suburban area. So we are going to hopefully find out on November 6th what the consortium is going to do, which will then also be one of those last minute kind of projections that we plug into the forecast, because it is a extensive amount. That's a huge amount. The 13% is costing the district almost $600,000 over last year's amount. So another 10% is probably going to be about 450. So that would be $1 million increase from last year to this year, which again, nobody has planned for. The consortium has consistently run well. They've averaged about 6.5%, maybe 7% over the last decade or so. So this is definitely, it's a lot. So we're trying to do some things. We're doing some short-term things and some long-term things to help us make sure we can have consistent numbers, I guess, and do the best we can. Anything else to add about that?
No, we're actively involved, to say the least. Craig and I. So it has caught the superintendent's attention in the group, because I've been on the job for a quarter now here, and I'm leading in attendance at these meetings as a superintendent because I've attended 2 meetings in a row. But I can tell you, November 6th, after a virtual call with all the superintendents, they will be there, because no one has planned, nor does anyone want that 10% mid-year increase. But it may require a change in vendor, and that gets emotional when people think or believe that they may have to change what doctor they go to. The disruption of a change like this is not widespread. It's very, very little. So it may not even impact us. So, but Craig and myself, we are actively involved to make sure that we do what's in the best interest of all districts, in particular our district.
Yeah, and we reconvened our insurance committee. We met with them once a couple weeks ago, and we are meeting with them next Wednesday to kind of talk them through this as well, to see if they have any additional feedback from their perspective. Because while we absorb the majority of that cost, they will also have to absorb a percentage of that cost. 15% of the premium is paid by our employees. So we want to make sure that those stakeholders are kind of at the table. So we got good feedback in the first meeting we had. So we're hoping to continue that conversation with them. And yes, I want to thank Jeff for attending those meetings. It is a consortium that was originally started by superintendents, and superintendents have turned it all over to the treasurers until something like this has happened. And then, not that they're assigning blame, but now everyone's eyes are on the ball of like, what's happening over there? I've always done at least my job in making sure the superintendent is informed. Some other schools operate differently, but I'm always happy to have Jeff attend with me, because I think that's good to show, unity, and it does help that it's at CVCC and we don't have to drive very far. So all of our meetings are actually right down the street, and we can get there in about 3 minutes or 4 minutes from here. So we'll keep everyone posted, and I'll be obviously talking about that more at the next for the 5-year forecast. Any other financial questions? Would you like me to read the check register? Anybody?
Just the first page.
Okay. All right, donations. This is not a cash donation. If you, we talked about this, I think, before. So this was basically a monetary amount of the donations. We really want to thank Event Source for putting on the homecoming, the outdoor homecoming. We see that vendor basically made a large contribution to make that event successful. That's the second time they've done that. So we are recognizing that at the board level and appreciate that type of contribution for that event.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Do we do anything? I mean, do we send them a formal thank you or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure. I mean, I probably shouldn't need to ask that, but I mean.
But this is something, as we have changes, at these tables once in a while, it is something that we could start to do as a board, recognize some of our most outstanding business partners every year and bring them to a meeting to have a formal recognition. So noted.
Yeah, because the homecoming was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah.
It's pretty special.
Yes.
Attached here are student activity budgets, which we may not have seen before, but we are going to board approve them. So if you have, basically what all this is doing is letting you know what has been submitted to my office. We're looking for no negative balances. So we basically give all of our club advisors their beginning balance of what was in their accounts on July 1st of 23. They submit how much money they think they're going to bring in as a revenue to set their budget. They also then indicate how much money will be spent in expenditures. And then this is their approximate ending cash balance at the end of the fiscal year on June 30th of 2024. So they've submitted all these forms. It's gone through a review process from the building principal. It comes to my office and then ultimately here for your board approval. And then the minutes, and that's it. Any other questions?
Questions or comments?
I'm gonna ask, and it just could, my brain's a little fried, but with the budgets, for the, clubs and everything, they're ending with a positive balance. They just keep going forward with that. I mean, they're not a for-profit.
No,
I'm just-
it depends because some of the clubs, first of all, these are estimates of what they say. Typically some of the larger ones, for instance, like robotics, that's July 1, but they spend pretty frequently. So they're I mean, you can see they bring in, they spend a lot and they also bring in a lot. This does include on the expenditure side, the 50% of their supplemental, and it also includes 50% of their transportation cost.
Okay.
So some of that's also included in there. So technically and theoretically, it does move forward. So they could potentially just keep building. We don't really have any clubs that consistently carry large balances though. So I would not say that's like a problem necessarily. It's not been an issue for us, and sometimes they're also saving for an event or a purchase a couple years down the road. And so we kind of monitor it, but at the same time, like it's not usually an issue to carry forward the balance.
Okay.
Our total amount for student activities though is, I mean, when you total up all of the student activities is a lot.
Yes.
Like at the end of the fiscal year, I think they have like about $200,000 in there, maybe 150 and $200,000 depending on the year. So they try to spend down by the end of the year. And again, these are just estimates. So we kind of reconcile all of these at the end of when we do the final appropriations in June.
Because I'm just trying to understand, because there's, parents that are very concerned about the fees that they have to pay for clubs. And our parents are also any of our students that are participating. Not only are we pay to participate, but there's also fundraising that we're being asked to do, any number of things they're asked to purchase or, and so when I see that our clubs are carrying balances and have, I'm just asking that question as to.
Yeah. And not every single club on here, like Key Club, for instance, does not have an advisor fee, for instance. So not everyone has, there's no advisor supplemental. So they have like a $5 or $10 due, I think, but there's no supplemental attached to it either. So it just depends on each club's a little bit different. So, yeah.
So are these balances, are they reflective of pay to participate fees plus fundraising?
The pay to participate fee does go 100%, as I think I explained that about a year ago. So, and last year was our first year that we did all of that. So 100% of the pay to participate fee does go in the revenue fund. So that's what's covering.
100% meaning the
Of the fee.
family's portion and the board's portion?
No, so we only charge 50% of the salary and the transportation out of here. So the 100% of the fee goes to this fund. The other half of the salary and transportation just gets billed to the general fund. That's kind of just done on the accounting system side. So that's why the revenues are higher than maybe they've been in the past as well, is because that money was typically all going into the general fund and then coming out of the general fund. And now we've moved it so their accounting is better and more accurate and we're actually billing that stuff against the actual 200 fund instead of the general fund.
Does this include fundraising though, if a club does fundraising?
It does. So they would put on their revenue. So they calculate and say their revenue sheet, basically, if you look in that student activity book or handbook we did last month, it gives you the form that they fill out. So they have to put in, I think I'm going to have 50 kids. The pay to participate fee is $50. They do the revenue calculations. And then they also can say, I'm going to do a fundraiser or whatever. And then they put their expenditures. So the big thing we're looking for is that none of them are negative. Some of that too, they are anticipating all of the revenue. And then we have to also remember that we have pay to participate caps. So the caps do not get then put into those funds. And so then their revenue could be short from what they technically estimated because the caps can play an impact. I think last year for clubs, I want to say it was like $9,000 between all of the clubs that never made it into those funds because they had hit the caps.
Other comments or questions? Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Ms. Kwankowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosa?
Yes, motion carries 4-0. Item 15A, announcements. The next regular meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for November 15th at 7 p.m. Item B, resolve to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Pikowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yes.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes, motion carries. The meeting is now adjourned. Everyone have a great evening. Remember to vote on November 7th and happy Halloween.